Councillor Becky Bogdan, Councillor Rachel Whipple, myself, Catrice McKay, Councillor George Handley, Councillor Travis Hoban, and Councillor Gary Garrett, as well as the Mayor, Michelle Kafusi. The opening prayer will be provided to us today by Benjamin Fergus, and they will have the Pledge of Allegiance by Councillor Becky Bogdan.
Our Father in heaven, we thank thee for this opportunity we have to meet together as citizens to discuss issues that are important to us. Thank thee for this land that makes it possible for this meeting to take place. We ask that a spirit of civility may accompany this meeting, that issues may be articulated clearly and with an open mind, and that all decisions may be well informed. And we ask this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
All right, will you all stand? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, our first item is a presentation recognizing Provo City Employee of the Month, and it will be presented by Mayor Michelle Kafusi, as well as the Director of Customer Service, Amanda Erkenbrack.
Chair McKay and Vice Chair Whipple and members of the Municipal Council. Today we have the privilege of celebrating an employee who consistently brings dedication and care to our community. It is my pleasure to introduce Amanda Erkenbrack, our Customer Service Director, who will present the November 2024 Employee of the Month Award to a remarkable member of our customer service. Go ahead, Amanda.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council. If it's okay, I'd like to invite Annalie Larson to join me up here. And I'm going to read because if I don't, I'll cry. So bear with me. Annalie joined us in 2015 as a part-time CSR, and I was her trainer at the time. Without a doubt, her training class was one of my favorites. I quickly learned that Annalie was a dedicated mom to her 3 kids and now 2 dogs, an avid shopper, that was important, and above all else, a perfectionist. We may have even given her the name Princess Pony early on. From the start, Annalie excelled in her role, striving for perfection in every customer interaction. She outgrew her role as a customer service rep and eventually moved on to be a billing editor and was responsible for our remittance processing. Then in August 2019, she was promoted to executive office assistant. True to her ambitious nature, Annalie then again excelled in her role and was quickly promoted to call center manager in April 2021. This was during a very difficult and challenging period, which she talked about this morning in an earlier presentation. We were post-implementation of our new billing system, and it was COVID. It was a really challenging time. Despite the circumstances, she stabilized the operations of the call center and set it on a positive course. When I returned to the department in fall 2021, we faced the retirement of key billing staff that left within just weeks of one another, giving very short notice and not leaving anyone who knew how to run the billing process. The outgoing billing manager advised that Annalie was the right successor and would be able to figure it out, which she did. I followed his recommendation and I transferred her, I didn't even ask her, I just moved her, from the call center to the billing team, a decision I have never regretted, and hopefully she hasn't either. So within 2 years, she held 4 different positions within the city, probably more than anyone else in the department. Despite the steep learning curve, Annalie embraced the challenge of learning the billing process with determination. She not only learned the process, but improved the process by reducing the number of billing cycles and reducing the amount of time each cycle takes to process. Her meticulous work ensures accuracy in monthly bills for every customer. Annalie's dedication is unmatched, reliable, and professional. She's one of the first managers in the office each morning, even though I tell her she doesn't need to be, and rarely misses work. She often works weekends and holidays to keep billing cycles on track, sparing her team from bearing that burden. She also takes responsibility for the city's revenue very seriously, thoughtfully considering each decision involving fees and charges. Annalie is an excellent manager. She has a unique relationship with each of her employees and often goes above the requirements of her job to ensure her team is doing well, professionally and personally. Annalie embodies Provo's values and is a remarkable representative of our city. I'm proud to have her in our department and even more proud of her service to Provo.
We're so proud of you, Annalee. And I'll say I'm here at odd hours and for some reason, Annalee tends to be here as well. And anytime we have a billing issue, I'll reach out to Amanda and she'll say, Annalee's already on her way in. And so this is very deserving. Congratulations. Let's go ahead and take a photo with the council, if that's okay.
Yes.
And you can just. You should hold your award because it has your name on it. We're proud of you.
Sorry. Okay, one more. Thank you.
All right, we will now have a presentation recognizing the fall 2024 Provo graduates. It is presented by Scott Henderson.
Thank you, Municipal Council and Mayor. Take this opportunity to introduce the Provology class of fall 2024. They are now amongst the most informed citizens after attending 10 weeks of 2+ hours on Wednesdays, all with us together here. If I could share one moment, there's so many great moments because there's so many great people in this program, but there was a conversation. It was on a Wednesday night after we had just heard as a class presentation in the mayor's office, and Mayor Kafusi had given that, and it was during Council Chair McKay's presentation, and Brad Farnsworth leaned over to me. We were sitting next to each other, and he goes, "You work amongst great leaders." And that was one of those moments, because I hope he was not only talking about the great leaders who I think are the best that have ever been in those positions, when our council chair and our mayor, but also talking about all the leaders they were able to talk to in the department over these years. And it was something that was just one of those moments where sometimes we do not realize independently when you're amongst a great organization and amongst great people, and maybe we need to take advantage of that, and we shouldn't have another set of eyes do that for us. And so I appreciate Brad saying that to me. So if I could, I'd like to ask the mayor and council chair to join me for the reading of the class names. And then tell class members, after receiving your diploma, if you could stay up front for a class photo and a scan photo by Kay again amongst the entire group. And I'll read from here. So Michael, can we start the music? Tara Allen. Thank you. Brooke Barnes. Thank you, Brooke. Congratulations. Dennis Della Corte. Congratulations, Dennis. Lori Dickman. Otto Dickman. Dina Driggs. Brad Farnsworth. Thank you, Brad. Debbie Farnsworth. Congratulations. Rhoda Goffin. Olivia Gruwell. Jan Hartman. Congratulations, Jan. Brenda Hernandez. Congratulations. Soraya Hillam. Thanks. Hannah Hoover. Congratulations. Ashley Jensen. Congratulations, Ashley. Paul Matthews. Lynn McKell. Congratulations, Lynn. Julie Red. Congratulations, Julie. Janelle Todd. And Robert Todd. Benjamin and Emily Weinheimer have told us they were not able to attend tonight, but did want to read their names. So I'd like to express our congratulations to Provology Fall of 2024. And after the photo, we have a nice little reception and dinner for you all. So thank you for your commitment to Provo. Thanks.
Bruce, why don't you stay there? We just always want to document our graduating process because it's so popular. And if the council wouldn't mind just standing, it worked really well last time. It was fantastic. So that's perfect. I'll run. I'm super tall, so I'll come over here. I'm my friend over here. Jennifer, you tell us when. Try it again. 1, 2, 3. Okay, then we get we got to get everyone's face.
See how that goes.
All right. As indicated on the screen, a required public hearing will be held for certain agenda items prior to council action. After each such item has been presented, time to comment will be provided for all those who wish to speak. For items that do not require a public hearing, public comment will still be taken following presentation of the item, but will be limited to 10 minutes. Up to this time, up to 15 minutes have been set aside for an open public comment period, which is intended to allow comment on matters that do not appear on the agenda, but are limited to topics regarding municipal business or within municipal council purview. Persons who speak during this time to an item that is on the agenda will not normally be afforded a second opportunity to speak during the comment period specific to that item. During any public comment period, each speaker will generally be limited to 2 minutes. Due to noticing requirements, no formal action will be taken in this meeting on matters that do not appear on the agenda. Those with comments are invited to approach the podium. Those participating on Zoom will need to use the raise hand feature to indicate they wish to comment. The chair may choose to alternate between in-person and online commenters. Please begin your comments by stating your name and your city of residence. And you'll each have 2 minutes to speak. So now this open comment period, you each have 2 minutes and we have 15 minutes overall. So let it begin.
Good evening. Hello, everybody. My name is Hilda Lindley. I'm a resident of Provo, Utah. The reason that I'm here today is to let you know that about 2 years ago, on November 15, 2022, I was involved in a car accident as a pedestrian, and I suffered a lot of issues. But the reason I mention that is because I'm here to express my gratitude for the fire department, Captain Cathers and his team, and also to the police department, Officer Dudley, Officer Nye, and Officer Billings. I don't know if they're here today, but without their assistance and prompt attention, I wouldn't be here. So that's what I'm here to let you know, that they are an asset to the community, and I'm very grateful. And I hope they be properly awarded for this. I have written a letter that I plan to give it to them. So that's what I'm here today. Thank you for the time that you are guys giving me today. Having a wonderful day. Bye.
Do you know what? It is wonderful to see you. We have seen your husband many times, and we're so grateful that you're well enough to come talk to us.
You just met a very wonderful woman that's endured so much. She's still under treatment and will be probably for about 4 more years, we hope, because of her brain tumor that she had. But we just want you to know we're grateful for officers like Officer Billings and Captain Dan, and we really appreciate them in your city. You got a very great city. After being through the Provology class, I've learned a lot more about the city. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Robert Todd. My purpose this evening is to ask you to not further disincentivize rooftop solar in Provo, but instead to encourage home solar systems by changing some of Provo's current rooftop solar ordinances. I previously sent each of you some data and other reasoning behind this request. Provo Power's mission statement is to provide reliable energy services while being fiscally responsible to the citizens of Provo. Provo Power has proposed reducing the subsidy currently paid to rooftop solar owners to make it more fair to Provo Power customers who do not have rooftop solar. According to their website, Provo Power has an important public objective to resource 60% of its power from renewables by 2030. Currently, Provo obtains only a little over 1/3 of its energy from renewables. Ask yourself, as demand for power increases in Provo, why wouldn't Provo Power, as a publicly owned utility, be eager to purchase power from its own citizens who have invested in rooftop solar instead of investing in building new solar sources themselves? Rooftop solar homeowners have already invested their capital for their systems, and more would do so if it's not further disincentivized. Does this seem like a subsidy or a wise, costly promotion of a public objective to help promote clean air and public confidence in Provo City leadership? Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Any other public comment?
Good evening, council members. My name is Genevieve Colling, and I've been a resident of Provo for 29 years. I'm here to say thank you for putting the topic of trap, neuter, vaccinate, and return on the agenda for a future meeting. And I'm here to voice my support for TNVR programs in our community. I've personally seen the positive effects of TNVR. In January, I TNVR'd one female community cat through the Best Friends voucher program. I also paid out of pocket to spay and neuter 3 of her kittens because voucher availability is limited. By taking these steps, I've helped stop the cycle of reproduction, improve the health of these cats, and reduce nuisances like loud mating calls and spraying. Based on average litter size, survival rates for feral kittens, today there would be at least 20 additional feral cats in my neighborhood if I hadn't taken these measures. And by the end of next year, it would be up to 50 or 70 additional cats. So this illustrates how quickly a single unspayed family of cats could multiply in just 1 year. TNVR efforts can prevent this growth and its associated challenges. Many cities have implemented TNVR programs. They report measurable success, including fewer calls to animal control, healthier outdoor cat populations, and more harmonious coexistence between people and community cats. I urge you to support TNVR as a proven compassionate solution to managing community cats in Provo. Thank you for considering this measure in the future.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is, I live in Eagle Mountain, but I run Celestial Zoo Pet Rescue that operates out of Utah County. So I'm here on behalf of them. I'm as a pet rescue that primarily operates in Utah County. We are well aware of the struggles of the cat population in Utah County. Most of our intake is from Utah County. And with some coming from the shelters, we also run a large Facebook group that is dedicated to helping people in Utah County fix community cats and take care of the overpopulation of community cats in the area. And we network some of these kittens into the rescue throughout Utah. Our primary intake is through feral colonies with these kittens and the kittens that we find. We have just our rescue takes in over 700 kittens a year from feral colonies in Utah County. We spend a lot of our time going into these areas to trap the cats, getting the vaccinated, neutered, and rehomed into loving homes that are forever homes, and we try to make them healthy and thriving in these homes. Just every year, we have TNR'd and over 1,200 cats a year, mostly out of Utah County. This is the kind of overpopulation that we're dealing with. And we've seen the effects firsthand that TNR has on a population, how healthy the cats can stay once they are fixed and taken care of, and how low the population in that area remains once they are fixed. We watched other cities and county shelters that have adopted these kinds of TNVR programs be able to free up the space needed in the shelters for those who are not thriving and need specific rescue help, or for the adoptable cats, or for the tiny kittens that tend to fly out of the shelters. Things need to change in Utah County with overpopulation of cats. And partnering with Best Friends to bring in these programs not only helps with the overpopulation in the shelter, but also with the overpopulation of the pet population in the city and in the county. And it also helps the cities in these shelters save money by less staying in the shelter. And it seems to be a win for everybody involved. And I'm really happy that you guys are considering this program.
Thank you so much. I am now going to call on someone who's online, Nicholas Bacchus. You have your hand raised. You can speak and give your city where you live. Nicholas Bacchus.
Yeah, hi. This is Nicholas Bacchus. I live in Provo. I just wanted to comment on the trap neutering for the cats. And, I think everybody can agree it's sad when cats get put down, but neutering and releasing cats back into the wild it doesn't seem responsible. Cats kill over between 1 and 4 billion birds a year just in the US, and they predate on small mammals and lizards and all the other animals. And trap, neuter, and release does not appear to be very effective. An evaluation in California said that any population effects were minimal. And I just don't think that we should be releasing feral cats. The focus should be on trying to get people to adopt them and trying to spread, trying to get more people to spay and neuter their animals. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas.
Good evening, Council. My name is Carla Tanner, and I'm a resident here of Provo, and I live in District 2. I want to personally thank my council member, Mr. Hanley, and the rest of the City Council for voting yes to support the pilot community cat program. This decision is a meaningful step toward creating a more humane and forward-thinking approach to animal welfare in our city, and a leading example for Utah County. That's what I think is so amazing. Provo, we can be a leading example for Utah. On a personal note, I have a neighbor, well, he's a friend that lives in an adjacent neighborhood that has community cats. And he reached out to me a couple weeks ago, and he cares dearly for these cats, but has noticed that there is a need for help in the neighborhood. And he has heard if he has to take these animals to the shelter that they will be euthanized. And he doesn't want that. He doesn't think that's humane. And so a program like this would help this friend to be able to keep the cats in the community. And they're actually very good neighbors because they keep the rodent population down. Okay, and that's something that we really love. Something like this would help a Provo City resident. There are good people in the city that are asking for a program like this. And I understand the council's time is valuable. And this is a way to quickly demonstrate the community's backing for this program. So anyone that lives in Provo that is for this pilot community program, can you please stand? Okay, there are residents that are so excited for this. So with your support, we can take this crucial step toward becoming a model for compassionate, effective animal care in Utah County. Now let's work together to make Provo a leader in humane animal.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Amy Mata. I am a resident of Salt Lake City. I am also a volunteer with the Humane Society of the United States, and I am here just to lend my support for the TNVR program that Provo is considering. I've seen it work personally in Rich County for a colony that I help manage. And I'm here if you have any questions about the program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sherry Lynn. I'm from Springville. I'm Norm. I was actually from Provo. But I would have probably about 70 cats if it wasn't for the best friends and the TNR program. They have helped me so much because I started feeding a mama that just started showing up at my house, and she had 5 babies. And I fell in love with those babies. I've always been a dog person. And then the mother had 5 more babies. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I got a help through best friends and helped them TNR. So, and at the time we TNR'd, we had 4 pregnant and one in heat. So They have helped me so much keep my population down to about 14. I have rescued 9 kittens and with Celestial Zoo that they went to, and I've adopted 2 cats through Celestial Zoo now because I love them so much. And this is such a great program. I don't know where I'd be because my neighbors said their cats are fixed, but they're not. And I have people just abandon cats in our neighborhood. And so I have to get them and get them fixed because they come to my house to eat. And so I have a couple I need to get fixed right now. And it's just finding time and having the right time to do it. So it's a great program. And I don't need 75 more cats to feed.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more. All right. Not seeing any more, I'll close public comment. Next, we have an applied motion on a resolution approving the appointment of individuals to various boards and commissions, and this will be presented by Mayor Michelle Kafusi.
Okay, we love that we are filling all these positions and keeping them staffed. I'm recommending the following appointments to Provo City boards and commissions as indicated below and submit this for the council's advice and consent. Jen Babcock. Jen is a talented artist with a passion for creating beautiful things and teaching others to do the same. She's deeply committed to promoting the arts in Provo and serving our community through her creative expertise. I am recommending Jen be appointed to a 3-year term on the Arts Council ending June 30th, 2027. Jennifer Griffin. Jennifer owns a business here in Provo and has been a TV and film producer for 21 years. She loves all the arts and working with a variety of people to complete different artistic projects. I am recommending Jennifer be appointed to a 3-year term on the Arts Council ending June 30th, 2027. And Ann Allen, just double checking to make sure I've got them all. I'm hitting them good. Ann has studied art design and architecture with a degree in theater design. With 20 years as a film and television set designer, she brings extensive experience in collaborating with diverse personalities and navigating compromise to ensure project success. I am recommending Ann be appointed to a 3-year term on the Planning Commission ending June 30th, 2027.
Thank you, Mayor. Any questions for the mayor? All right, thank you. We will open this item up for public comment if there's any comment on these appointments. All right, seeing no comment, we'll move to council discussion. Any council discussion on these appointments? All right, we'll move to a vote. Councillor Bogdan.
Yes.
Councillor Christensen.
Yes.
Councillor Garrett.
Yes.
Councillor Handley.
Yes.
Councillor Hoban.
Yes.
Councillor McKay, yes. Councillor Whipple.
Yes.
That passes 7-0. Next, we have an applied motion on a resolution to placing a 2-acre parcel of ground located approximately 1400 north, 2400 west on the surplus property list and authorizing the mayor to dispose of the property. And this will be presented by Tara Riddle. I'm not even going to dare say that word because I always get it wrong.
Which word is that?
Ombudsman.
Oh, ombudsman?
Yes.
I thought you were going to call me something else that you couldn't pronounce. Okay, we have talked about this in our work session, but I'll go over the details. The property that that you'll be contemplating surplusing this evening is located just about 1400 north and 2400 west. It's sandwiched between I-15 and the railroad tracks. This property was acquired back in 1977 for a future power station. As mentioned, it contains 2 acres, and as customary, we did a departmental review, and the property was recommended for a property trade. So not for surplusing and getting rid of, but actually surplusing and then trading. The reason we're doing this is the adjoining property owner has some property that they would like to develop, and I'll show you the picture here. And the way that our property is currently situated will limit their ability to actually develop this property effectively. So they have proposed trading the property for an equal 2 acres just to the south. So with this, they have agreed to provide us access from 1680 North, and the easement will be large enough to accommodate any of our delivery vehicles for our future substation and give us any of the access that we need for any future power lines that would run to the property. So,
Thanks, Tara.
Yeah.
So this is the land that we're going to keep is intended for a substation.
correct.
All right,
So the use will stay exactly the same. The location is what's changing.
great. Thank you, Tara. Any questions for Tara? All right, thank you. We will open this item up for public comment if there's any public comment on this item. All right, seeing no public comment, we'll move to council discussion. Any discussion on this item? All right, we'll move to a vote on the implied motion. Councillor Christensen,
Yes.
Councillor Garrett,
Yes.
Councillor Handley,
Yes.
Councillor Hoban,
Yes.
Councillor McKay, yes. Councillor Whipple,
Yes.
Councillor Bogdan.
Yes.
That's passes 7-0. Next, we have implied motion on ordinance amending city code to combine fire and police impact fees to one public safety impact fee. This will be presented to us by John Borgett, our Director of Administrative Services.
Thank you, Honorable Council. This item was also discussed in the work session a couple weeks ago. As we were reviewing and looking at our police and fire impact fees, we observed that the state actually refers to them as a public safety fee. They don't have them separate between police and fire. And so we wanted to be consistent with the state. This also provides some more flexibility as we may have a police or a fire project that comes up. And we want to be able to fund those based on the plan and be able to not have them differentiate differently between the two. And so we reviewed it, and that's our recommendation. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks so much, John. Any questions for John? No. All right, we'll open this item up for public comment. Any public comment on this item? Seeing no public comment, we'll move to council discussion. And any council discussion? All right, we'll move to a vote on the implied motion. Councillor Garrett,
Yes.
Councillor Handley,
Yes.
Councillor Hoban,
Yes.
Councillor McKay, yes. Councillor Whipple,
Yes.
Councillor Bogdan,
Yes.
Councillor Christensen,
Yes.
and that passes 7-0. Next, we have an implied motion on an ordinance amending Provo City Code regarding stormwater management. This will be presented to us by Carlos Garcia. He is a public works engineer.
Good evening, council. Thank you for your time. Once again, it should be relatively short. If you recall from a couple weeks ago during a work session, the reason for the amendment change to Provo City Code relating stormwater is due to legislative changes at the state level, now known as Utah Code Section 19-5-108.3. It specifically states that municipalities are no longer able to impose fines on construction sites for any stormwater violations. It also establishes enforcement procedures for said violations. It has an effective date of January 1st, 2025. And like I said, the reason for the amendment changes is just so we stay compliant with state legislature. There are some other things that the bill suggests we do, but we're already doing that. So really the biggest change we'll feel is just the fines that are done.
Great. Thank you, Carlos. Any questions for Carlos? All right, thank you, Carlos. We'll open this item up for public comment. If there's any public comment on this item. All right, seeing no public comment, we'll move to council discussion. All right, we'll take a vote on the implied motion. Councillor Handley,
Yes.
Councillor Hoban,
Yes.
Councillor McKay, yes. Councillor Whipple,
Yes.
Councillor Bogdan,
Yes.
Councillor Christensen,
Yes.
Councillor Garrett,
Yes.
and that passes 7-0. Next, we have an implied motion on a resolution appropriating $385,000 in the Sanitation Fund for the purchase of a replacement garbage truck, applying to the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2025. This will be presented by Jimmy McKnight.
Thank you, Council. This item tonight is based on an incident that occurred in August, where we had an electrical fire with one of our sanitation trucks. that destroyed the truck. Here's a picture after its current state. So right, we're doing what we can to get any scrap value from this vehicle, but we're needing to buy a new one, obviously. And as a self-insured utility or operation enterprise fund, we are requesting that council approve a $385,000 appropriation from Sanitation Fund balance to replace this truck. This will not impact the general fund. It's all from the garbage collection rates. And we had a little bit of a discussion in work session about our intent to move to a lease program with fire trucks so that we are able to keep newer trucks and replace them more often. We don't have this kind of thing happen very often, luckily, and I think it can make sense to continue to be self-insured. But there's, accident that happened that requires us to do this resolution.
Okay, thanks, Jimmy. Any questions for Jimmy? Counselor Whipple has a question.
Yes, so this has been a couple months since it's been out.
Yes.
Do you know how this has affected our collection operations?
So we do have a few backup trucks that they're able to use. They're just older and require more maintenance. So we're able to keep it up with those backups, but we're essentially down one truck and the backups are filling in. So as long as we're able to keep those going, we've been able to make this happen, but we've been exploring different options and that's where we've been able to get more information and decide to go with this lease option where we'll be able to buy this new truck and a year from now replace it with a very small cost that they buy back the old or the 1-year-old truck and give us a new truck.
And once we do the appropriation, what's the timeline for getting the new truck here and on the street?
We have been able to find one that's available sooner than typical than we would order, in our typical new or replacement truck process. I'm not sure how many months it'll be, but it's as fast as we've gotten a garbage truck in probably 4 years. So.
Okay, yeah, because I know with the fire trucks, there's a huge lead time on getting those.
Yeah, typically it would probably be about 18 months, but I think we're 6 months or less. So.
Okay, so we can limp along until then.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Becky Bogdan.
Jimmy, I have to say, I do appreciate that this is coming out of the sanitation fund and not out of the general fund. I appreciate it when the departments are more self-sufficient. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, we'll take a vote. Nope, we're going to open this item up for public comment. Any public comment on this item? All right, see no public comment, council discussion. All right, we'll take a vote on the implied motion or on the resolution. Counselor Hoban.
Yes.
Counselor McKay. Yes. Counselor Whipple.
Yes.
Counselor Bogdan.
Yes.
Counselor Christensen.
Yes.
Counselor Garrett.
Yes.
Counselor Handley.
Yes.
And that passes 7-0. All right, next we have an implied motion on a resolution approving the appropriation of $7.5 million in the airport fund and $3.5 million interloan fund from the energy fund to the airport fund and a $4 million interloan fund from the Mountain Vista fund to the airport fund. And this will be presented to us by Brian Torgeson, our Public Works Division Director.
Hello, Council. Glad to be here again. So we went over this in quite a bit of detail in work session. We'll breeze through it for the benefit of the public who might be here to comment on this. But at the airport, one of our major responsibilities is snow removal, obviously ensuring the ability of aircraft to land at the airport. And the FAA requires that we identify what's called primary surfaces, which is those priority pavements that require snow removal priority. That includes our primary runway and our parallel taxiway, as well as our terminal apron. The FAA also gives guidelines for or requirements for how quickly we need to remove that snow. And you'll see in the chart for an airport of our designation, we have 30 minutes to clear all the pavement on our primary surface list. That primary pavement is equivalent of 46 lane miles, which is quite significant when you really think about it. So this is our 3 years ago now, when I got to the airport, this was the extent of our snow removal equipment. Oh, maybe the video is going to work. Nope. Anyway, the crown jewel of our snow removal equipment is our 1957 Army surplus snowblower. You can see Trent is operating the windshield wiper with his hand. His comment is that's what real airports have, is a 1957 snowblower. So needless to say, the FAA visit us, let us know we were not in a good place as far as snow removal equipment and our 139 certification program overall. And so they gave us some pretty stiff warnings and told us that we needed to fix it. And so over the last couple of years, we've spent a fair amount of money. Fortunately, we've had excess revenue at the airport, like we mentioned earlier in the work session today, but a large part of that excess revenue has gone to buying additional snow removal equipment. On the right, you can see two beautiful yellow plow broom combos, which we had just show up a month ago. And then the picture on the top right is we've got $2 million worth of equipment, but nowhere to park it out of the weather. And so we're actually, we've negotiated with a hangar owner who's allowing us to park that in a hangar, in a private hangar. Fortunately, he doesn't have an aircraft that's large enough to require that extra space, but that's not sustainable. The FAA also requires that we have a building to store our equipment in for obvious reasons so that we can respond appropriately. So this is the building that is being designed. In fact, our civil construction team will start dirt work tomorrow on the dirt work operations for this project. It's funded half by the FAA and then half through Provo Airport PFC revenue. And so the ask is that $7.5 million loan be used so that we can continue construction and get that done just as quickly as possible. John is available if you have questions regarding the loan, but following the work session, we did make sure that we switched the repayment schedule so that energy was being paid back first. And so hopefully that helps ease the concerns there. And then just a note that we are planning, we know we're always cognizant of the general fund and the airport's impact on that fund. And we plan on taking over that annual property payment in FY 2027. So with that, are there any questions?
Any questions? Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chair McKay. I would be interested in a public comment from our finance director, John Borgett, related to the solvency and ability of the interfund loan and the Mountain Vista fund to provide these interfund transfers with payback over 4 years.
And I think it's important to reiterate, come on up, John, that none of this is coming out of the general fund.
Yeah, I would just mention that with the Mountain Vista Fund, that money came in from the sale of property at the Mountain Vista Business Park. And the plan and intention for that money was to use it for economic development purposes throughout the city. And so I think for that $4 million, number one is it's a temporary, it's a loan that's going to pay interest, the same interest rate that would have received if it had been invested the way it's being invested right now in the state pool. And then it will be paid back. And then once after 5 years, that money will be back and it could be used for other economic development purposes. So The only thing that would limit the city on would be their ability if they intended to use that money in the next few years for economic development, it wouldn't be available until it got paid back. With energy, we've talked with Scott Bunker, our department director. He's talked with his board. It does lower their fund balance and particularly their cash if they were to have some event, but they still have a substantial amount there, but just not as much as they would have. I thought that the council's recommendation to see if we could pay that back earlier, because initially we were going to pay that back in 28 and 29, where now it would be paid back in 26 and 27 is good. I feel like that barring some unforeseen earthquake, it could definitely impact if we had some major earthquake or not, but I still think we're pretty prepared. The other thing I would say is that the city's had a real good track record of treating these loans just like a loan that's paid to a bank outside the city. We make sure that those payments are made on the scheduled date that they're specified to be paid. And so we're real systematic about that, and we treat it just like normal debt. And so any other questions, or does that answer the question? Thank you.
Thanks, John. All right, we will open this item up for public comment. Any public comment on this item? All right, see no public comment, we'll go to council discussion. Any discussion on this item? Councilor Becky Bogdan.
Thanks for listening to us and for switching those around. And I appreciate that. And thanks, Brian, for trying to make the airport very much self-sustained. You know how that important is that is to me. Thanks.
All right, any more discussion? All right, we'll take a vote on the implied motion. Councilor McKay, yes. Councilor Whipple?
Yes.
Councilor Bogdan?
Yes.
Councilor Christensen?
Yes.
Councilor Garrett?
Yes.
Councilor Handley?
Yes.
Councilor Hoban?
Yes.
That passes 7-0. Next, we have implied motion on a resolution approving transfers of $64,624 from the general fund and $450 from the Parks and Rec CIP fund to the water fund, and the appropriation of the resulting $65,074 in the water fund for the water treatment plant. And this will be presented by Kelsey Zarbach.
Thank you. What this resolution effectively does is it takes the balances from projects that had received ARPA federal government allocations from the council. It takes the balances from projects that have been finished and moves it to one of our remaining projects in the water fund. So $64,624 would be transferred from the general fund to the water fund, and then $450 would be transferred from the Parks and Rec CIP to the water fund to help pay for the water treatment plant. And that is in accordance with the ARPA standards, and it will help us meet the encumbrance deadline for ARPA funds by December 30th, 2024. Any questions?
Thanks, Kelsey. Any questions for Kelsey? I think you're good. Thank you. Any public comment on this item? All right, see no public comment. We will move to council discussion. Any council discussion? All right, we'll take a vote on the implied motion. Councilor Whipple?
Yes.
Councilor Bogdan?
Yes.
Councilor Christensen?
Yes.
Councilor Garrett?
Yes.
Councilor Handley?
Yes.
Councilor Hoban?
Yes.
Councilor McKay, yes. That passes 7-0. Next, we have a public hearing to receive input from the public with respect to the issuance of up to $37 million of wastewater revenue bonds for the purpose of financing construction improvements to the city's sewer infrastructure. This is presented to us by Eric Hunter.
This resolution provides the maximum parameters for a set of two series of bonds, one to be publicly offered and one to be sold to state agency. The Water Quality Board bonds have a maximum interest rate of up to 18%, but that's just reflective of a potential default rate that they include. Otherwise, both series of bonds have the parameters of a maximum of $37 million in principal amount, maximum maturity of 25 years, interest rates of not to exceed 5% and a maximum discount of 2%. The resolution also provides for the legal notices under the Bond Act. And there was, of course, ratifies the public hearing today, and there will potentially be another public hearing once we receive a commitment packet from the state agency. The resolution also authorizes the completion and execution of the related bond documents, and it serves as a reimbursement resolution for certain federal tax purposes. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Eric. Any questions for Eric? All right, think you're good. I'd like to open this item up for public comment. Is there any public comment or that on this item? All right. Next, we have an implied motion on a resolution authorizing the issuance of wastewater revenue bonds, the execution and delivery of supplemental indentures and other required documents, and the taking of all other actions necessary for the transactions. And this will be presented by Gordon Haight, our Public Works Director, as well as Eric Hunter.
I appreciate being able to come before the City Council again, and we've had this discussion in the work meeting. We're going to have Dave Torgerson give a brief explanation just for any questions that will be there, and then Eric can give any more questions, and we have Jimmy here for the hard questions, so we're in good shape.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for the opportunity. As Gordon mentioned, we discussed this in quite a bit of detail in the last work session, so I will be brief. But the Water Quality Board adopted a new rule that went into effect in January 1st of 2015 to begin monitoring phosphorus through the treatment plant. And then also adopted at the same time that rule would go into effect where we'd have to start removing phosphorus by January 1st of 2020. The existing plant at that time was incapable of meeting this rule. And so at the time, the council administration voted to, there was a lot of analysis done in whether we build a new facility, retrofit the existing facility, combine with other communities. And at that time, it was decided to build a new facility at the existing location. In 2017, Provo applied for and was granted a variance to extend the deadline of when this rule would come into place to 2025. And at that time, the project was estimated to cost $120 million. The Provo, we went to the Water Quality Board to solicit funds from the Water Quality Board for that amount, and they granted us a $75 million loan, $2 million of principal forgiveness. And so Provo funded up to $100 million for the rest of the project. So as part of that, we had to make some drastic cuts and cut portions of the project out. In 2022, we went back to the Water Quality Board to solicit more funds. And we were granted $15 million from the Water Quality Board, $10 million of a loan at 0.5% interest. $5 million was given as a principal forgiveness, also known as a grant. But part of that, we were unable to build the full facility, so we're going to have to operate on both new and old, putting us at risk of failure as the plant is quite old. So during our budget cycle in the past year, we approached you as the Water Quality Board and notified you of our intent to approach the Water Quality Board again to solicit more funds to complete the project. As part of this, the state indicated as they provided us the loan for the first part of the project that within a 10-year period, we needed to complete the entire project, which included 3 bioreactors. The funding that we currently had only allowed us to do 2. That 10-year period, we're a little bit over halfway through that. And so within the next 5 years, we have to, according to the state rule, have to complete that. So we looked at various approaches how to do that. We looked at doing pay-as-you-go, self-funding that, and saving up, $5 million a year to get to that. And with inflation happening and all of that, we were just not able to meet this deadline, unable to meet that. So we approached you with the intent to approach the Water Quality Board to and that and other funding sources to fund and complete this project. And so some of the things that were cut out of the project that we need to get put back in are the 3rd bioreactor, an electrical system upgrades, and a new laboratory and administration building. And so we approached the Water Quality Board again for more funding. They authorized $7 million, leaving us approximately $30 million short. And so our approach is to request a revenue bond to fund the rest of this. And if there's any questions in regards to that and how that works, I can have Jimmy answer that. But any questions?
Any questions for Jimmy? Counselor Bogdan.
Dave, even though I like to hear you talk, and I'm going to have Jimmy come up, I just, for the public's, it's nothing against you, Dave. It really isn't.
I'm not going to take any of that.
Okay, Jimmy, just for the public that's here, I know we rehashed this a little bit at work meeting, just barely. You can explain it better than me, but we've been saving for quite some time for a pay-as-you-go program, and costs have just gotten out of control. And so we have figured that taking on a loan won't cost our residents any more because we're already collecting that as for pay-as-you-go. So it's not going to be any utility rate increases in order to do this bond. We're just going to do it and get it done because it's going to be cheaper for us in the long run than the save-as-you-go plan. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so in the wastewater fund, we are funding the entire wastewater system, the collection system that brings the waste from people's houses and businesses to the treatment plant, as well as the treatment plant where it's cleaned. And we utilize this, all the funding options that are at our availability for wherever they make most sense. So we do use pay-as-you-go for most of the collection system improvements. We've used grants, as Dave mentioned. We borrow from the state, which has been generous in those interest rates that have been lower than anything we could have gotten anywhere else. And as we looked at funding the projects that have been discussed through pay-as-you-go, we determined in order to do that, we would need an immediate rate increase just to start saving, to be able to hopefully get the improvements done in a timely manner. But as we went through the budget process, we determined that this was an ideal opportunity from our perspective to utilize bond funding so that we could get the project done now, replace a $5 million a year savings, which would require a rate increase, with a loan payment, which wouldn't require a rate increase because we have sufficient funding, as you mentioned. So we feel like this is the best fiscally responsible opportunity for the city, for the wastewater fund, to be able to get these improvements done and not need an immediate rate increase.
Thanks, Jimmy. You can explain that a lot better than I can.
All right, any more questions? Counselor Whipple.
Yeah, so my question that I have right now is how quickly can we get this thing built? Because it seems like every delay costs more and more. And it seems that every time we've put something off or put a portion of the project to the side, that part comes back and it costs twice as much.
You are correct in that, and we are able to immediately move into this project. We have several portions of it already designed because we had to pull it out of the original project, and we have a contractor that is already on site constructing the existing plant, so we can move immediately into constructing this.
So does this get rolled into the existing project? You don't have to do a new RFP or anything
It
for
does,
this?
yes. It can get rolled into the existing project.
Okay, what kind of contingency do we have built into this one?
That is a good question. There's not a lot of contingency because they have recently built 2 of the existing facilities, so they are aware of what is already there. So we feel confident with not having a lot of contingency. I think there's like 5% contingency.
Okay.
So there's not a lot.
Yeah, we've had fun recently with a 5% contingency. My concern is that I want to be sure that the amount that we're bonding for is enough to actually do this without you having to come back and ask for a little bit more, or come back and say, we thought we had it, but we do have to drop this aspect of the project now because this costs are too much.
I agree with that. I'd have to ask, and I don't know, maybe Eric can answer that as far as, the current process is, we are finalizing the design. We have most of it done. And then we'll have the contractor, they've given us preliminary estimates, but they don't have final costs because we don't have final drawings. We don't have final design done yet. So I appreciate your concern as far as bonding additional amount. I would have to defer to.
We just coordinate. So one of the things we've talked about, I think Dave's right. We have a contractor that's very experienced. We believe we're in the right ballpark, that this $36 million is going to finish everything in phase 1. If for some catastrophic reason we don't, what our recommendation would be is to use our operation costs that we have to make up whatever difference, because it wouldn't be significant in doing those things. So I suspect, again, nothing's ever absolute, but I believe this number is going to finish the project. The phase 1 element, all the liquid waste will be completed. And if we have a struggle, we'll go into our operation costs. It means it would likely sacrifice maybe some of our capital projects elsewhere in the city for a period of time, but it means we don't need a bond now, and we've protected ourselves against a catastrophic cost increase at some element. So right now we're locking down all the costs for these last elements of this. And so I'm really confident we're going to be able to make the final payment with this 36 million.
So is this the right order of operations to do the bonding before we actually have the cost locked down?
So we have a very tight cost estimate in place. The only reason we haven't finished the final cost is we didn't have money to pay them. So we stalled on doing the design because we were going to do it 5 years from now. And so now we're saying we have the opportunity to have the money. So we should have the final design, but what we're working on now are not huge cost elements. We're in place with those, but I'm confident that this 36 is going to take us where we need to be.
Okay, well, I'm still concerned at the thought that we may only have a 5% contingency, because I think 10% is probably city standard, and I don't know if you can make up that extra 5% out of your operationals budget if it becomes necessary.
5% on the $36 million. I think we can get there. The rest of the plant is getting there as we anticipated with the amount of money that we contracted for. So our track history with this contractor has been extremely successful in the sense that we have not seen overruns. We have not seen increases. We have not seen any of the things you might expect, even in this economy. So I am confident that we're going to have that same situation as we sign. They initially were looking at doing the third bioreactor and all these elements. So that was part of the original contract when we pulled those elements out. So they're well aware of what we need to do. And that was part of the original plan, was to have them do these things.
Are there any other elements that have been pulled that we are not putting back in right now?
The only one we're a little skeptical on is the landscaping, but we are going to do that. And so we will find a way to make this look beautiful.
Okay. If you do have to come back to ask for more money, we will play this portion of the meeting back for you.
I will be ready for that, and you should.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Counselor Christensen.
Just because the city can borrow money doesn't mean it should. I'm a very fiscal conservative and don't like the idea of borrowing money. So when we talk about bonding, oftentimes it feels like it's just an easy way out. We've spent hours on this topic, and I'm convinced that this actually makes sense for all the reasons that Jimmy talked about, because I think a city should pay as they go whenever they can. And that's what the city is actually doing, is paying as much as we can. So for the reasons that Jimmy talked about in terms of bonding, because I know a lot of people talk to me, say, it's just so easy to bond. Those bonds, we have to pay back. Yes, we do. But in this case, I think it makes tremendous sense. And so I'm very supportive of what the city is recommending here.
Thanks, Craig. All right. Any more comments? On the wastewater plant or sewer waste, it's the same thing. I see we have lots of people here today. A tour of that place is awesome for young women's group, young men's groups, Cub Scouts. It's totally fascinating. And I did stop using flushable wipes because of my tour. Too much information, but doing my part. So I found it fascinating. So thank you. All right. Councillor Bogdan.
When will this be done? I don't know that we've ever asked that. How long until we're finished with all of this construction?
I haven't received a schedule from them, but I would estimate it's approximately about 2 years.
2 years from now or 2 years from the start of construction?
2 years from now.
2 years from now. So that's pretty good. Thanks.
Brian, do we vote on this one? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We will call for a vote. We already did public comment, didn't we? Yeah. Jimmy, do you have a
I'm
comment?
just going to go to the last slide that that talks about the details of the resolution and the bonding. So, I mean, this is essentially what Eric explained on the previous item, but I just thought it would be good to have these details up.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair McKay, maybe
Yeah.
just to address Councillor Garrett's question and make sure that everybody understands the process here. This item and the last item were really the same agenda item. Because of the statutory requirements for the public hearing, bond counsel that prepares these items prefers to notice the hearing as a separate agenda item. So the public comment took place during the public hearing, and now this is just the passage of the resolution.
But we did ask for public comment too. So, okay. All right. We'll take a vote on the applied motion. Councillor Bogdan.
Yes.
Councillor Christensen.
Yes.
Councillor Garrett.
Yes.
Councillor Handley.
Yes.
Councillor Hoban.
Yes.
Councillor McKay, yes. Councillor Whipple.
Yes.
So that passes 7-0. Next, implied motion on an ordinance, amending the zone map classification of real property generally located at 1534 South, 1100 West. And this will be presented by Aaron Ardmore.
All right, thanks, Council. So we talked a bit about this in pre-meeting today, our work meeting today. I just want to go through the slides of what we kind of showed at Planning Commission and for this hearing, kind of inform everybody that's here if they're here to comment on it. So if we can go to the slides. Okay. Okay, this is a start. So the property is down here in the red shape. So there's a few properties in there. The rezone request is for 3 different zones. If we can go to the concept plan. You had them in the work meeting. Okay. All right. So yeah, let's scroll down. Sorry. Thank you. All right. So if everybody tilts their heads 90 degrees, we can. There's so the 3 different zones. I just want to identify those on the plan. So there's CG 2.5 acres of general commercial zone in the corner, and 12 acres of LDR zone, low density residential, which is our attached product here, and the narrow detached product here, and against the Dry Creek Trail here. Those 2 elements of the plan came directly from the general plan, the Southwest Neighborhoods Future Land Use Map, which allocated those densities and those uses to these areas on this important node between at the intersection of 1100 West and Lakeview Parkway. There's a lot of things that we like about this plan. We've worked with the developer over several concepts to work out the road network to get as much of a grid as we could through there for connectivity, to get different product types through lot sizes and actual different product types like the detached and the attached townhome style, and a good connected open space with trails through there. So we've identified those things, and those were critical to this plan. So we've put those into a development agreement, this concept plan, and some of the elements of the trail system and the fencing that would be required along here. As it went through Plan Commission, they really enjoyed this plan. They noted that it was meeting a lot of the goals of the general plan, and it's one of the better ones that they've seen in the rezone requests that they've seen over the years. So the one outstanding thing, which is also detailed in the development agreement, is the sewer connection. So if we could go to those JPEGs I sent. Thanks, Malia. All right, so the orange line is indicating just about 1.5 miles of sewer line that would have to extend from this development to the west to that red circle where the current manhole to connect to the lift station would be. So they are working through those details. They're working through the different property owners along there, all the different parcels you can see in the blue lines, and then with our engineering public works staff and trying to develop a plan that will work there. So rest assured, even if you grant the rezone tonight, the plat and everything that follows the plat, the building permits and the sewer work wouldn't move until that is secured. So that is an important element for this rezone request. There's other questions that came up regarding owner occupancy and for sale percentages and restrictions, deed restrictions on the lots. The applicants are here, and I think they would love to address those. They know that those questions are coming. But other than that, that's all I have to say for now on this.
Thanks, Aaron. So we can hear from the developer. Hello. If you could state your name and the city you live in, that'd be great.
Andrew Christensen. Good evening, council and everybody. What question? We love this project. It's got great mix of different products. We've tried to really make it a walkable community, a community that's livable and just a community that we can be proud of, I guess. I don't know what to say there. But also we are willing to have these units so they have a year that they cannot be rented. So we want to have ownership of the homes and
Great. So you put that in the HOA in the development agreement.
we will.
And even with the resale of the home?
We're going to put a year on there. And so,
So initial sale.
Yeah.
Okay. I know one thing, this is a denser community neighborhood, which is great with all the diversity in that. Have you made sure that every unit has a big enough garage that they can park? We've had other projects in the past where maybe the garage wasn't done big enough to fit a truck, or there's parking issues because the garages maybe only fit one car with how big some people's cars are these days, or things like that. Have you made it livable in that respect, thinking about parking in the neighborhood?
yes, I think we have. We've made our lot sizes like on our townhomes. Some lot sizes are smaller. These are all 24. So you should have enough room for everyone to park. We're not trying to do single car garages. We're trying to make them livable and very accessible to the people. So
Yeah.
Will there be parking on the street in the neighborhood?
there will be some. Yeah. There.
Okay. Is there parts that don't have parking?
The main collector won't have parking, so the other ones will.
The big one down the middle?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for the Councilor Christensen?
So are you saying that all of the homes in this project will have the home ownership requirement for the first year?
Yes.
So all of them?
Yes.
Okay. And while there's no parking on the main collectors, I'm just wondering, I'm going back to the discussion we had like in Buckley Draw, we were talking about the driveways and is there really space, for them? Which of these units wouldn't have? Obviously, some of these units are large enough and many of them are very small. So in terms of driveway size and garage size, I'm just wondering what you've done to make sure that parking is available.
Like I said, we've tried to make units that are big enough that we don't have, we don't have that issue of, you got one car garage and one car behind it and that's all you have. So we have, we have a 2-car garage, we have parking in front of those garages. We've tried to really worry about those things.
I think that was his question. So there
Yes.
is parking. Some townhomes just have the sidewalk and the garage.
Yeah.
So every unit has the garage and cars can be parked on the driveway.
As far as I'm aware of, that should be just fine. We'll be selling this product to a builder, but yes, we have that room to do that and we can require that.
So how does that work for some of the, again, it'd be interesting, do you have any other renderings so we can see some of these denser townhomes? I'm just trying to figure out how you would have a 2-car garage and parking for 2 cars. We've had neighbors be so burned by lack of parking that this is a significant concern.
So if you look, can you go a little larger there? So what is our setback there? So we have 20 feet there. So you'll have 20 feet to the building envelope on those right there on A. And then you'll have the home inside of that. So you have some room there to park.
So,
Sorry.
So let me just check with Aaron. Aaron, are there any areas here where we're not going to be able to park the cars that we need to park?
So the security of the zone standards is going to help us out there. So that 20-foot setback he's referring to in the front yard, that's behind the curb or the sidewalk to allow tandem parking leading up to a 2-car garage.
Okay.
And that's what these are designed for. That's what the design elements of the other LDR zone would require. And the Chapter 1437 has minimum sizes for garages now. So I think all of this should be covered if you think the zone is appropriate for the area.
Aaron, is that 20 feet from the curb or is that 20 feet from where actually you would have the planter strip and the sidewalk?
It's 20 feet from the back of the sidewalk. So 20 feet of cleared space for a vehicle to park in.
Counselor Bogdan.
Yeah, so in the development agreement, there's not going to be very much wiggle room. So when he sells it to a builder, we're going to get this product.
Yeah, much like you did in the Buckley drop recently. That's a good recent example of a very tight site with very specific widths and depths for buildable lots. So as we work through that one and this one, we required from the applicant examples of floor plans and elevations that could fit on those lots and still meet our standards. So we're confident that that will work out.
Thank you. And Aaron, can we go through the fear of some of my residents for eminent domain for the sewer? Is there any fear of that for that sewer line to go through? To take property?
Not eminent domain. So the applicants are working with those property owners. He can tell you more about that possibly, but as was stated in the work meeting, there's no support from staff and no request from staff to
Or the
ask
city as a
council for
whole.
eminent domain. So yeah.
And
city
if a
council would have to
property
approve that.
owner decides they don't want to sell their property, there's plenty of space in the right of way for the Lakeview Parkway for that sewer line to go?
I think it is dependent on if they can work through those property owners. Or else they're tearing up a brand new road, and I'll let engineering speak on that.
Okay, can we have engineering speak on that?
So what we have out there, I don't know if it's good to bring up the map, but the right of way, we have 15 feet behind the curb that would allow for utility. Now, the sewer is particularly deep, and it's, do you have the map showing the sewer line? The first one you put up. So with this approval, the developer would need to either work with each of the property owners and get some additional right of way, or they would need to work with the city and provide funds to protect or rebuild the road if they decide they can't get the right of way and go through it. So there's a path forward with this development without taking any additional property. So they don't need any additional property. Those are good questions, but we would not recommend any condemnation, and that would be this board that would decide that. We would not see any path forward that would be reasonable. So I don't think any property owners out there are at risk of any eminent domain. And we would not approve a project unless they had dedicated easements or right of way for the line. If they can't secure those, they would have to come back and negotiate to use part of the road that has been constructed. I'm very anti tearing up the road for a lot of reasons. So we would like to encourage them to continue to work with property owners to get the additional right of way so that the road is protected. And so that's what we would encourage them to do.
So if I understand this correctly, it would shut the project down until they're not able to get any building permits or anything until they get that sewer line done. And if they cannot do any negotiations with the landowner, if they decide, hey, I don't want to sell my property, then the project just does not go forward.
Unless the city were to agree to allow a portion of the road to be just torn out and rebuilt. So like I said, they could do it without an agreement with the property owner. We are at the point where we're not willing to give up road yet, but that's something we could do in the future. But right now we would want to protect the road at all costs, just because the public doesn't feel kindly with building a new road and tearing it up. So we're very conscientious of that, but they don't need additional property and could go forward if a deal was struck with the city. So there is a path forward that way. If you grant approval and this project doesn't go forward, I think it's 2 years, then, or a year, and everything lapses and they have to start over again. So that's gives them time to resolve and address issues. Is it 1 year? 1 year, in 1 year.
In 1 year.
So if this was approved tonight and they prove unsuccessful with us or the property owners, then they're back to ground zero again. Am I saying that correct?
Thank you. I really like this project and I really like how you've cooperated with staff to get this. Is there anything that we have to keep people off of the trail over there? Off of the adjacent landowners that are on the other side of Dry Creek? That
Not sure
trail
your
along Dry
question.
Creek?
Are you talking about part of his development?
Yes, yes, the Dry Creek Trail that he's gonna put in.
I imagine there'd be a fence or something. Oh.
So
She's saying keep them off the adjoining property owner's land.
So
I
the
mean, yeah,
property
fence-
to the
fence
west.
lines, essentially, the creek itself and the fence lines would restrict movement outside of the developed area.
So that's something that your project would put up, would be fencing between the property to the west of you and that trail?
The property to the west, they would have to,
Yeah, jump the creek,
they'd have to walk through the creek to get there.
which they can already do, right? So.
So I don't think right on that side we would have to have a fence, but yes, on the road and stuff where we're going to be required to have a fence on some areas.
Thank you. I like the project, but I am reserved about the fact that I like the fact that we have the initial, you have to have a homeowner occupied for a year. I am not loving the fact that when it's a sale, it's not another year that you has to be homeowner occupied like every time it sells. And so that's my reservation in this.
And I just wanted to add, we have worked with a lot of the property owners, but with the sewer so far, we worked with Patterson. And so we have a pretty good amount of the property owners, and we do have some more to work on. But we worked with Patterson, we've met with them, we have come to agreement with them. They own a large piece of this, and so we are working on that and getting that done. So.
And I'm just curious, so you're getting this all ready to be built and then you're out, like you sell the whole thing to somebody?
Typically.
Is that
we
how it
do.
works?
So we,
Okay.
and we've done this before. We are very willing to do a development agreement, and we've done this in Spanish Fork and other communities where we go through and we take plans, and it's kind of hard for the builders because they kind of have to live with what we design.
Mhm.
We try to work with both, and we've done it in the communities of, I feel like they've turned out really well, and we I think we've been the councils that we've worked with have been happy with the situations that we've done. So I think
Great.
that it works. I think that if you're willing to work with us and work with the people that we sell it to, it should work wonderfully. So.
Okay, Counselor Whipple.
Yes, so I'm happy to hear that you already are working with some of these property owners. That's great. So is the idea that you're working with them and you're purchasing the easement and then you give that easement to the city for the sewer utility?
So like Patterson, they're a developer also. They have committed to have an easement in their property. They're going to leave that as open space. And so that will be an easement for the city that along that trail, and they own clear over to almost where Geneva Road will come down. And so we have quite a bit of that already.
I guess that like serves their interest as well to be able to get that line going through
does,
because it
and
could
so-
open up theirs.
Yep.
All right. Maybe this one's for Gordon. So in building the road, did you build it out all the way to the existing right of way? There's not like a space on the side of the road where we could put this already?
We have 15 feet of space between our curb out to the fence line. So we have 15 of unbuilt upon right of way.
And why aren't we putting the sewer there?
We are. Unfortunately, this is a deep sewer. There's dewatering. There's technical issues that would probably require a larger footprint than 15 feet. And so where we've met with the developer and he's worked with Patterson's and others is that additional property they need to build the sewer to get to the proper depth and dewatering is going to be easements provided for on the north side of our easement. The section where they can't, or if they are unsuccessful in getting easements through a portion of the property, that's the section that we would have to likely the footprint would take in some of the road, at least one lane of road.
Okay, so I'm trying to make sure I understand this. The sewer probably would be mostly within that right of way that we have, but you need the extra workspace on their properties in order to do it?
With 15 feet, you're probably going to need a 20 to 25 foot footprint to build the sewer line.
Okay.
And everything under that footprint is going to be destroyed. And so
Right.
So,
right.
so if they don't get right, so the city is absolutely opposed to anybody building on some property they don't own. The city agrees to that wholeheartedly. We support that principle. So if they can't expand onto the private property side, there's a potential, although at this point, we're not there yet. This is not where we are. You could construct it on the city right of way, but you'd have to rebuild the road. So we've encouraged the developers to keep working with the property owners. They've been successful with a number of them. I know they're talking to others of them. And so we've encouraged them to talk to property owners, and we want to make sure every other available option is done before we start talking about the road.
Okay. Yeah. It's a
I don't know
very
if that
nice
was
road.
clear or-
Yes, it is. So, the other question I have is about flood control issues. Like, are there going to be swells built into this? Are we just building up the height of the dirt that we're working on, or what are we doing here?
We are, FEMA requires an elevation of 4498. And so we'll be raising a lot of this community up. There won't be basements. And so it'll all be slab on grade. And that's just a requirement that we have to do. And we understand that. And so that'll all work out. We won't have basins we're so close to the lake. And my understanding from working with our engineer and your staff is that if we start putting basins in, we're going to plug up your system because we're going to be letting out water at the same time the water comes from up higher. And it really is an issue of now you've got everybody's water at the same time.
We don't want to be catching water here.
Yeah. So.
Okay. And then what are the plans for your open space? Are they just supposed to be like a field with a little trail through it, or?
We'll do some amenities there and stuff, but right now we just want to get to that point, and then we'll have some amenities in there, and we've planned on trails that'll go to each, and so they'll be able to walk those trails.
Kind of like a park-like space.
Yep.
Yeah, I do know that there's interest in dog facilities. That's been a thing.
We haven't thought of that yet. So
Yeah.
those are some things.
It'll probably
Just
come
put some
up.
doggy bags around your open space. You will need that.
All right. I will add a dissenting note from some of my other counselors on the parking issue. I know that every space that we dedicate for parking makes a property a lot more expensive and less affordable for people. And I think it would be great if we had some places offered that would just be designed for one car or two small cars, because somebody looking at that property could say, yeah, this actually suits my needs and I would rather pay less for it. I say that knowing that that is not the opinion of all the council, but there is a high cost for parking and for requiring large parking spaces on our developments.
Councillor Garrett.
We do have tremendous need in the city for these types of products, entry-level housing, step-up housing. And I'm wondering if you have targeted price points yet for these products.
We don't yet. But we have tried to make this so we have step up so you can start and end in the same community if you really wanted to. So
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much. We appreciate you coming tonight.
thank you.
We'd like to open this item up for public comment. Any public comment on this item?
Hi, I'm Brooke Barnes. I am the District 3 Chair and also the Lakeview representative for the neighborhood program. So I just wanted to share some of the concerns that came, concerns and feedback that came up at our last neighborhood meeting. A lot of these actually have been solved by listening here, so that's great. But just thought I would let you guys know, people were concerned about the houses not being built in the flood zone. A lot of our areas in the flood zone now. We don't need to add to that. So that was a concern. We also had the concern about home ownership. I think people were happy with the idea of making sure that the homeowners needed to be there for at least a year, and adding that into making that something that has to be there.
And that'll be like a deed restriction too on the house, which will be great.
Yeah. So that will be awesome. We also, there was concern about the dry creek that runs through that property, that it was important to our neighborhood to preserve that and to make that kind of an amenity of the neighborhood. And also the sewer running to the lift station. I guess, let's see, it says for those areas that can't gravity feed to existing sewer lines in the area. So it sounds like that's being dealt with as well. And then just incorporating a trail along the north side of Lakeview Parkway and along the Dry Creek. And also, which I think was talked about, but that was something that we wanted to make sure that there was open space, that there was a trail.
It's in the development agreement.
It was awesome. Yeah. So that's what we wanted. And then also that looks like that the streets would be city owned except for the rear loaded homes, which it also, I believe that is the case from listening to the meeting and what's happened today, that the streets would be city owned except for, I'm assuming, like the back of some of the townhomes, the rear loading. And then also just making sure that there was the parking issue, that there would be a full two-car garage, and also the ability to park on the driveway. So if people have 3 cars, or that we're not having an issue with that. And also with the access, if it would be right in and right out or full access, which is just for my notes, and I don't know what that is. So does anyone, maybe Aaron knows, right in, right out. Okay. So yeah, those were the concerns from our neighborhood. It seemed like I was at Provology. I was not actually at the meeting, but I did watch the meeting a few times. It seemed like there was generally a good feeling. People were interested, but did have some concern. So thank you.
Thanks for coming. Any other public comment on this?
I'm actually from that area, so I know that the water table is very temperamental. And one of those concerns I have for a project, especially with this density, with a construction background as well, is there is always going to be settling. No matter how much you compact, there's going to be cracking in the foundations, in the roads, in the sidewalks, because of the settling and the water table. So like, what precautions can we take to help the residents who are supposed to be affordable housing avoid that extra cost of the settling? Thank you.
What is your name and where do you live?
Handon Torsak, and I'm from Provo.
Thank you. We will address the public comments after we hear them all. Any other public comments?
Hello, thank you, council, for your work here tonight. My name is Aaron Tracy. I'm resident off 400 North, 400 West. And I'd just like to urge the council to, if the goal of this project is for housing for the citizens of Provo, to have ownership of property, that stipulation of the 1 year of ownership seems kind of weak to me, kind of more like lip service than actually of achieving the goal. And also some of the questions you brought up to the developers and such didn't have many concrete answers that, oh yeah, we can do that, or oh, we were planning on that. And I just urge the council to get more concrete promises saying, yes, the garage will be this much, or oh yes, we will have a driveway that could accommodate such vehicles. So I'd just like to urge the council to be mindful of those goals that are trying to be achieved and get promises rather than just wishful thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Hi, Tana, Provo South. I was probably I live in those homes that might have been burned by parking. I were struggling on Slate Canyon, and I live in Canyon Meadows. With the 20 feet from the back of the sidewalk and the accessible parking, wheelchair users have to ride in the street because of people that are parking in front of their driveways. You know, they're like, oh yeah, no, you can totally park a vehicle here, but it blocks the sidewalk access and makes those with ADU accommodations in an inappropriate spot. So I would just like to advocate for the builders to keep those accessibility options open.
Thank you. All right. Who could speak to the settling thing? Gordon.
So whenever we have a project like this, we require a geotechnical report that needs to come back. We review it. It determines how much fill there has to be, what the material, and then we inspect it. We have requirements of the material they bring in. And so that's the process we use everywhere in the city, even if it's not a high water table. The building department does that as well. They have one for each lot that they look at and review. So we'll look at an overall one for the whole site, and they'll look at one individually for each building permit.
Thanks, Gordon. All right, council discussion. Councilor Hoban.
Well, I think I was just going to address the comment. The developer still has to follow our design standards. So for the new zoning, so they'll still have to have the garages and the driveways as such. So,
And we've recently added minimums. Councilor Bogdan.
I'm gonna answer the access question. There's only, if you can see on there, there's only one access point, it looks like, from 1100 West. So that's gonna have to be full access, not just right in, right out. Otherwise, they're not gonna get out. The other access is up north. But if I remember this correctly, I think that the issue is there's only one access point in, and as of now, if you can look, there's only one access point in and out of the subdivision. The secondary access will be blocked off until further development comes through. Is that going to be a problem for our fire people? Is that Aaron?
So just north of that collector access, there's a second access on 1100 West. So that's where the phase 1 and phase 2 will be. And as they plan to phase this into 5 or 6, phase development, I think fire will be reviewing those subdivision plats and project plans through our staff review and making sure that they still feel like they can get in and out of there.
And are these 100% city-owned streets other than those backfilled townhomes?
Yeah, so the rear loaded alleys wouldn't be, they'd be privately owned, but all the other interior roads
Are
would be
city-owned.
city property.
With no parking along that big, what is that? I can't even read that. Is that like
1500 south or 1560
Is that
south?
1560? Is that an extension of 1560? So 1560 will extend here and then curve up.
Right.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other council discussion? All right, we are going to take a vote on the implied motion. And Aaron and Bill, you guys have all the things for the development agreement that we talked about? Okay. As far as home ownership for the first year?
I was going to say, if you can just
Put that
rattle
in
those off in the motion, I
Okay.
can double check against my notes. Thanks.
Okay. What was their home ownership? All for sale.
So
first year.
1 year of home ownership.
And then the cars can fit on the driveway.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We are going to take a vote on the implied motion and ordinance amending the zone map classification of real property generally located at 1534 South, 1100 West, along with a development agreement which will include all housing will be for sale and owner occupied for the first year. And the units will have 2 parking spots in the garage as well as 2 in the driveway that are usable. We'll take a vote on the implied motion. Counselor Christensen,
Yes.
Counselor Garrett,
Yes.
Counselor Handley,
Yes.
Counselor Hoban,
Yes.
Counselor McKay, yes. Counselor Whipple,
Yes.
Counselor Bogdan.
No.
And this passes 6-1. All right, we are going to take a 10-minute break. So we'll come back at 7:30. Figure you guys want one? Hey, Malia.
Hello.
All right, next, an implied motion on ordinance amending Provo City Code Section 6.26.150, rental disclosure required to update requirements. This will be presented by Malia Daly, our council policy analyst.
Okay, council, I'm gonna give a kind of overview on the 5 items that are here before you. And then I'll go into,
Do you want me to read all 5?
no, because I want to vote each of them individually. But I'll just kind of give context for the public and just kind of orient ourselves. So these were the 5 motions that came from 2 different work meetings earlier this fall where we talked about ADUs. 4 of those motions had to go to Planning Commission, which are the 4 following this one. One of them did not go to Planning Commission just because the amendments did not involve Title 14, which is under Planning Commission purview. This one is Title 6, Chapter 6. So this one doesn't have a Planning Commission recommendation attached to it. So that's just kind of context for everything. This specific one, so if you remember, this is the rental disclosure change. So previous to this amendment that is proposed, we did have a rental disclosure section where we said when a tenant signs a lease, both the leasee and then the leaser needs to have a disclosure saying this is the zoning, you're legally allowed to rent here, all of that. We were not requiring them to turn that in. We were not recording those. We were not checking those, but they were saying, but code enforcement, when they were going to look on a code violation for something else involving that property, they could say, well, do you have your rental disclosure? So everyone should be apprised of the situation of this rental. We changed that. This amendment changes that to say that when someone signs a lease, this rental disclosure now needs to be turned in as part of that process in order to make sure that your rental is legal and licensed. It needs to have a disclosure agreement, and we need to have that within 10 calendar days of different occurrences. And we had that discussion. As part of that disclosure, we also added new requirements, which is kind of a vehicle registry. So the vehicles that are going to be operating on that property, both of the tenants and if it's an ADU of the landlord as well, just so that way that kind of helps code enforcement be able to track if there's like permanent cars there that are not then on the rental disclosure, then we can kind of ask about that as well. So that is what this proposed amendment is.
Thanks, Malia. All right, any questions for Malia? Thanks, Malia. Okay, we'll go to open comment for this item. Any open comment?
Is the rental disclosure?
Okay, we need you to give your name, please, and your city of residence.
Scott Murray. Is the rental
and your city of residence, sorry.
A lifelong city resident?
Okay.
Is the rental disclosure the same thing as a zoning verification letter?
I do not know what a zoning verification letter is.
No, it's not. It's not.
So what is the rental disclosure?
So
can you give your full comment and then you can sit down and then the lawyer will answer?
I was just curious what the differences are.
Yeah, thank you. Our lawyer will answer that for you. Brian Jones.
Yes, so the reference for the council, a zoning verification letter is something that you can request from the zoning department asking what the permitted uses are for your property. So it specifies what zone you're in and what the permitted uses are. So the rental disclosure agreement is an agreement that is required for every rental property in the city, executed between the landlord and the tenants, that specifies for the tenant, that advises the tenants of what the permitted uses of the property are, the permitted occupancy of the property, the permitted parking of the property, and can't remember if there's additional thing. There's probably some other stuff in it, but it's an agreement required for the landlord to give disclosures to the tenants about how the property can be used.
Thanks, Brian. All right, council discussion on this item. Councilor Garrett.
Just a follow-up question, Brian. Are rental disclosure agreements required
for family-owned property. For example, if you own a condo and you're renting it out to your children. It's gonna say it's been a long time since I've read every single
Scott,
provision of
do you
it,
know
so I
the
might
answer?
defer to Scott.
Scott Johnson.
So in the event that a property is being rented to a family member, it's not owner occupied, so it does require a license. And part of the rental dwelling license procedure is to have this
Very good.
sign. Current code says that they sign it, they keep a hold of it. What's being proposed is they sign it, present it to the city so that we can keep the record of those tenants have been notified of the use of property. Other items in the code.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Any other questions or discussion? All right, we'll do a vote on the implied motion. Councillor Garrett,
Yes.
Councillor Handley,
Yes.
Councillor Hoban,
Yes.
Councillor McKay, yes, Councillor Whipple,
Yes.
Councillor Bogdan,
Yes.
Councillor Christensen,
Yes.
and that passes 7-0. Next,
Oh, before we move on, I'd like to do a follow-up motion.
okay.
Okay, so I would move that we request an update on the implementation of these new requirements from the administration on the December 17th work meeting. Just because we're giving them new things to do and we want to see how they're trying to do it and if they're meeting any challenges.
Okay. Any questions on that motion?
I'll second that
Oh,
motion.
sorry. Seconded by Becky Bogdan. Any discussion on the motion? All right, we'll take a vote on the motion. Councillor Handley,
Yes.
Councillor Hoban,
Yes.
Councillor McKay, yes, Councillor Whipple,
Yes.
Councillor Bogdan,
Yes.
and Councillor Christensen,
Yes.
Councillor Garrett.
Yes.
That passes 7-0. All right, next implied motion on an ordinance amending Provo City Code to clarify and update standards regarding multiple kitchens in one-family dwellings. This is presented by Malia Daly.
Thank you. Again, so this is one of the ones that went to the Planning Commission. Perfect. So this is, if you remember, we had a discussion on different options to try and clarify and simplify this code because it was confusing both to residents and to code enforcement and legal to try and enforce. So this amendment here just kind of combines the second kitchen agreement with the ADU laws that we have in our code to make it one document. So that way, if people have a second kitchen or an ADU, then it's very clear on like, you need to sign a second kitchen agreement if you're in an area that doesn't allow an ADU. If you do allow an ADU, but you don't have one legally, then anyway, so now it's a lot more clear for residents when they come in on what the second kitchen agreement is for and the overall purpose of what that is. And it's also easier for code enforcement and legal then to track that along with zoning changes that might be for where ADU allowance is.
Great. Thanks, Malia. It's good to clean it up. Any questions for Malia? All right, thank you. We'll open this item up for public comment. Okay, see no public comment. We'll go to council discussion. Any discussion on this item? All right, we'll take a vote on the implied motion. Councillor Hoban.
Yes.
Councillor McKay, yes. Councillor Whipple.
Yes.
Councillor Bogdan.
Yes.
Councillor Christensen.
Yes.
Councillor Garrett.
Yes.
Councillor Handley.
Yes.
And that passes 7-0. Next, implied motion on ordinance amending Provo City Code to update the age of applicability for elder persons extra living space to 60 years old. This will be presented by Malia Daly.
Okay, great. This was another discussion we had and the council motion to just change this age from 65 to 60 for the extra person's living space. There was some questions in Planning Commission on if this is the same thing as an ADU. And it is not technically in code the same thing as an ADU, but they still would require like an RDL and keeping up to code, but it is not the same thing as an ADU. So the allowance as far as zoning is different because it is not an ADU. So it's allowed throughout the city as long as you are 60 years old.
Thanks, Malia. Any questions for Malia? All right, thank you. We'll open this item up for public comment. Any public comment on this item? All right, see no public comment. We'll do council discussion. Any? Councillor Handley.
Yeah, I don't think there's much support for going lower, but I would
still favor going to 55. And I would make the argument, I'm not really sure what the 60 years old, what motivated that number, but it seems to me that if we're talking about wanting to allow flexibility for people who are empty nesters, I'm confident that the demographics of Provo have a very high percentage of people ages 55 and older who are empty nesters. So it seems like we're arbitrarily cutting off a significant portion of our population. So I would still favor 55. But if anyone wants to speak in favor of that idea, I will make a motion. Otherwise, I'll just shut up.
I'm in favor of that.
I will make a motion that we drop the age to 55.
I'll second that.
All right, any discussion on the motion? I think this is feeling very Groundhog Day. Yes.
So I'm completely neutral on the age that we're opening this up to. I am disappointed that in doing this, we are not making the extra living space provisions consistent with our ADU provisions because there are different requirements on inspection and things like that. I don't like that this type is treated differently, and I don't like that we still retain that inconsistency in the code.
Well, what are the differences? Isn't it just that it can be anywhere in the city?
No, it's not that it can be anywhere in the city. I'm fine with that. But though the requirements for this kind of unit to be able to use it in your house, whether it can be inspected before it's rented out to somebody, these are different requirements than what we have for ADUs. And we haven't addressed that or changed it. So I'm just noting that this housing use or this property use is still in many ways different than what we do for ADUs. So I think that creates some confusion and inconsistency with the people who are using it. And that's my only comment on that.
All right. We'll take a vote on George's motion. Counselor McKay, no. Counselor Whipple.
Yes.
Counselor Bogdan.
No.
Counselor Christensen.
No.
Counselor Garrett.
No.
Counselor Handley.
Yes.
Counselor Hoban.
Yes.
All right, 4-3. That does not pass. All right, back to the implied motion at hand. An ordinance amending Provo City Code to update the age of applicability for elderly persons. Extra living space is 60 years old. And we'll take a vote on the implied motion. Counselor Whipple.
Yes.
Counselor Bogdan.
Yes.
Counselor Christensen.
Yes.
Counselor Garrett.
Yes.
Counselor Handley.
Yes.
Counselor Hoban.
Yes.
Counselor McKay, yes, that passes 7-0. Next, implied motion on an ordinance amending Provo City Code to update and clarify standards related to ADUs. This is Citywide Application. Again, Malia Daly.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Just gonna wait a second. Okay. I'm trying to remember what this one is. Oh, yes. Okay. Sorry. There's 5 of them. All right. So this is the one, this one has kind of morphed a little bit too since the work meeting motion that we initially made, I think in better ways after input from code enforcement and legal. So I'll kind of explain that to you as well. But the original motion that the council made, so as part of our ADU and RDL license process, when someone applies for an ADU, they have to qualify and meet all of the things that you have to get an ADU, which includes owner occupancy, but that was not in our code and it was not something they had to provide documented proof of. It was something that our code enforcement officers frequently did ask for as part of the process to review their ADU application, but the council just felt that putting that in the code so it was upfront when people were applying for an RDL, for an ADU, that they needed to provide documentation of owner occupancy. As part of that, as part of the motion, the council left what those documents and what that proof would look like to legal and code enforcement. and what they saw would be the best for that. So that if you scroll down on this text, you can see there. So under the new C, it has a list of things to establish physical residence. And they must provide, I believe it's
There used to be a certain number, and now it's basically we've kind of changed it into, to use Rachel's terminology as she'll recognize, kind of a preponderance of the evidence. It's a now you have to submit however much evidence is necessary to convince development services that you actually live there. And if you submit enough, and if they're not convinced, then they can require more evidence.
okay. That is a change that legal and code enforcement made that I think is great. So, but here's the list of those things that people can use to establish physical residence and owner occupancy of the ADUs. So that is now going to be upfront when they apply for that. As part of this as well, our good planners and code enforcement team talked about LLCs and trusts when they own a home. Planning Commission also, if you listen to their discussion, had a pretty lengthy discussion about this as well, about if a younger person goes in with their parents and establishes an LLC or with the help of a trust, then buys a home, and that child is living in the home, but the other person who is on the owner of the home is not living there, then does that still qualify as owner occupancy? And under the amendment that was at Planning Commission, it wouldn't be. And so because if you scroll up on this, thank you, this each member of the LLC occupies the dwelling unit with bona fide intent to make it his or her primary residence. So that is still included because Planning Commission cannot change code.
Well,
That
this
is
has
something
also been a new thing we've been seeing that's people are
Yes.
getting creative.
exactly. So their recommendation is to kind of change that and maybe make it a percentage. So that's just something Planning Commission brought up. I will say also as part of this process, and this is not included in this, but is separate and going to Planning Commission, I believe next week or tomorrow, whenever the next Planning Commission meeting is. Legal and code enforcement are worried about sham transactions that involve LLCs and trusts when owning a home and the owner occupancy and everything surrounding that. So they're actually bringing a separate amendment from their department regarding those to kind of clean up the code on that. So that way we can enforce that better and track that better.
That's great.
So I don't know much more on the details of that, but legal and code enforcement are both here and can answer those. So that is all I have
Okay.
for presenting this.
Travis Hoban.
So if a parent helps their child purchase a home and, they co-sign and they're on the title and the deed and all that, the parent has to live there in order for the child to be able to rent out the basement as an ADU?
If it's under an LLC, then all of the owners of that home under
Yeah.
this current code. then
Well,
owners
it
of the home.
doesn't necessarily have to be under an LLC. I mean, parents help children buy homes all the time. So that's what I'm asking. In that situation, though, it's not an LLC. It would just be, your dad helped you buy a home and can you rent your basement or not? He doesn't live there. Only
But
you
also a
live
lot
there.
of parents aren't on the title or that. If they can, I know many, that there's many who do that and they're not on the title or anything. They just give them the cash.
Yeah, Councillor Hoban, it depends on how they help them buy it.
Yeah.
If they help them buy it by being on the loan, but the house is in the child's name, then the answer to your question is no. But if they actually are on the title, then the answer would be yes.
And it may
What
be
do
that
you
the
mean,
mortgage
no and
lender
yes?
would require them to be on title.
Say that again?
It may be that the mortgage lender would require them to be on title.
That is possible. So, but to back up and answer your question, so if they are on the deed, if the title is in their name, then they have to live there. But if the loan is in their name and the title is exclusively in the child's name, they don't have to live
I would
there.
say that's probably less common though. Like
Probably.
typically they're going to be on the title and the deed and such. And if that's the case, they would have to live there.
That's been the law for a long time. This isn't changing that. That's been the law for a long time because of, well, at least my understanding of the rationale behind the policy decision is there's been a lot of instances where people have purchased a home and especially for students, for the exclusive purpose of that student. So the student is living upstairs and renting to, and living with 3 unrelated persons upstairs and renting the basement or to 3 more persons. And so that was a policy decision made to prevent that specifically.
I guess I don't know why that's a problem. I mean, somebody could buy a house today, live with 2 other people upstairs and rent the basement to 3 other people, and they're legal according to ADU law, right? But if their parents help them buy the house and they're on the title, they can't do that.
Most of these situations aren't them owning the house at all. It's just the parents owning the house.
But yes, Travis, in that situation, according to current code, then the first situation would be legal, the second one, no.
So, I mean, it goes to the sham transaction thing because to Catrice's point, historically, most people, if they were going to do that, it's really the parents' house. Okay. They're really the owner. And so it's not really owner occupied because it's really the parents' house. But then but in order to circumvent the statute, so it gets a situation where normally the parents wouldn't put in that situation, if you're buying a house in order to rent it out to 6 people, one of whom happens to be your child, you're probably not going to put your child on the title. But people were putting their child on the title just to get around what the statute said. So this was a policy decision made in response to that move to circumvent the current aims of the statute. But again, that's just a policy decision and it can go either way.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Malia?
I forgot to note, Planning Commission recommended denial based on the LLC and the concerns Travis is raising. Sorry.
All right, we'll open this item up for public comment. Any public comment on this item? Seeing no public comment, we will move to council discussion. All right, seeing no council discussion, we will move to a vote on the implied motion. Councillor Bogdan.
Yes.
Councillor Christensen.
Yes.
Councillor Garrett.
Yes.
Councillor Handley.
Yes.
Councillor Hoban.
No.
Councillor McKay, yes. Councillor Whipple.
Yes.
All right, next.
6-1.
The vote 6-1 passes. Thank you, Rachel. All right. Next, an ordinance amending Provo City Code regarding special use permits for accessory dwelling units. This is a citywide application presented by Malia Daly.
Okay, thank you. Before I get into these amendments, I just wanted to, because these were the questions and discussions we had in the work meeting leading up to this motion, which is the percentage of current ADU allowance in residential zone areas in the city. I worked with Grace in GIS this week, who is amazing, and she ran the numbers based on all the amendments that we have made this year, and we are now at 49% of residential zones in the area allow ADUs. At the end of last year, we were at about 54, and now we're at 49. So just a slight change in that, and I wanted to say that's current and update. Also, in our discussions in the work meeting, I had my numbers wrong for the number of special use permit applications. And in the ADU memo that Scott Johnson provided, and it was in supporting materials, there's updated numbers for 2023 and 24 for how many special use permits and other ADUs and RDLs that were applied for and granted in the city. So in 2023, there were 18 special use permits granted, and in 2024, there are 20. Well, in 2024, I got confused because I think I misread the charts. There are 12 so far approved and 12 under review, 4 that were halted due to this pending legislation here. So those are updated numbers.
I know those 4 that are halted have been moved forward.
Okay.
The 4 that were halted were moved forward.
But you said there were 12 that were halted.
Well, there's
No,
12 that were
those-
under review, and then 4 that were
stopped.
in the under review that applied after we had already made the motion for this change.
Mhm.
And due to the pending legislation, then they were halted because of that.
And they have been moved forward. Okay.
That's not what I was told by one of those citizens. So I'm not sure that's
Just
been,
happened.
well, I
Bill could
I
speak to
spoke with
it.
this person 24 hours ago.
Yeah, that would have been nice to know.
Well, just letting you know, I just heard about it today.
When did we make this decision?
So there are 4 APL applications that have been being held because they were submitted while there's been pending legislation going on. Patrice and I talked about this, and she felt it would be right to move those forward because they were submitted during this time. I need to have a discussion with Brian Jones about that because under the plain ordinance language, we may not be able to move this forward as much as we'd like to. So we had talked about moving them forward, but I'm not sure we're going to be able to do that. I'm going to discuss that in detail with Brian tomorrow or when we have a chance. Okay.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay. I just wanted to say that because I believe in the work meeting, I was saying there was 8 approved, and that
Yes.
is far off from actually what it was. So the numbers I had were very wrong. So back to the amendment here at hand. So this is in 1430, which is the ADU section of code that we have. Section 40 is the special use permit. So the pathways, as we call it in the council office. So there was 2 pathways, one which is the multiple properties, and they have to go through an ordinance text amendment and be added into the map of allowed use. And that goes before the council and becomes a land use rezone, not a rezone, but a land use decision. The other pathway, which is the one that we are taking out here, is the one where it's an administrative decision and single property owners, if they get 66%, so a supermajority of their immediate neighbors in support of them having an ADU, then they get a special use permit that runs with the property owner, not the land, and they're allowed to have an ADU as long as they're living there and staying with the requirements of having an ADU and a current RDL, obviously. We're getting rid of that pathway, so it'll just go to the one pathway where it's a land use decision by the council. We also added at the advice of legal, just a note in here that even if they do get all the signatures of their neighborhood and go to planning commission, the council still can turn down their application for ADU allowance because it is ultimately a land use decision. And planning commission recommended denial on this as well.
Thank you, Malia. Any questions for Malia? All right, thanks, Malia. Any public comment on this item?
Yes, my name's Scott Murray,
Thank you.
lifelong resident of Provo.
Thank you.
I'm building a house on Canyon Road next to the fire station, sandwiched between Edgewood.
Yes, yes.
I think I'm one of the 4 people or one of the 12 because I've submitted my application. I went through this ridiculous process of getting signatures. I got all of the signatures that I needed. Now, I understand the intent of the city council to talk to your neighbors who are owners. Well, guess what? The Edgewood condominiums, who are the majority of my neighbors, are about 25% owner occupied, and that's zone multifamily. I just don't understand when 3 years ago, our state legislature passed Senate Bill 82 that said, if you live in Utah, you can have an ADU so long as it meets the requirements of the city. And I'm talking about, it needs to be owner occupied. I'm going to live in this home. I'm 66, so I qualify for the age. But again, I really like this discussion about there should be no discrepancy between someone elderly like me and an ADU. They should be the same. But the legislature has said, I can have an ADU, but yet Provo City continues to push back on this. And I just don't understand it. I'm going to be owner occupied. I have plenty of off-street parking. It's going to be meet all of the building code requirements. And that's what is important. The other thing that I think the council needs to be aware of, that this is the shift, this is the movement. We're in a housing crisis, we're in a housing affordability crisis. If you're not aware, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac this past year changed the rules about getting a mortgage. If you have apartment, you can now use that income to qualify
Yeah.
for a mortgage.
Yep.
This is the direction we're going.
Thank you.
I just ask you to be reasonable.
Now, I do have a question for you, sir. Why did you apply for a special use permit if you could just do it anyway? You don't need
Well,
that.
Because, and there was some language that was just mentioned about my special use permit would expire when I expire. And I was always under the impression that the special use permit would stay with
Would
the
stay with the
property.
house. Yeah.
That
No.
would stay with them just so long
Okay.
as it's owner occupied. So when I die, and my kids inherit that house, if they owner occupied it,
Right.
then I think they should still have the special use permit. That's the reason
That was your
why
purpose. Okay.
I pursued the special
Thank
use
you.
permit.
Brian, could you please explain the exemptions for Logan, Ogden, and Provo?
Yeah, well, so a couple things. Well, I guess three facets. So first of all, HB 82, it does, the state legislature did say that the default is for ADUs to be permitted in all primarily residential zones. But they then immediately said that any city in the state can, notwithstanding that, prohibit ADUs in up to a third of their residential zones. And in college towns, they can prohibit them in up to 2/3. So, it's not a blanket. It's a default presumption, but with specific authority to deviate from it granted by the state legislature.
Thank you, Brian. We have another public comment. Go ahead. We just need your name and your city residence. And I do see that we have one online, so we'll get to you next.
I'm Ashley Jensen, and I live in the Rock Canyon neighborhood in Provo. I've lived in Provo for almost 21 years, and I don't ever plan to rent my basement. However, I lived on a street for 15 years on Dover where probably 2/3 of the people rented illegally, and there were just cars everywhere. And so when we were looking for a new house, I liked the Rock Canyon neighborhood because I heard they reported each other and, it would make it so there weren't cars everywhere. And then a few years ago, when they changed the rule and there could be ADUs, I was initially kind of against it, but I've actually become much more pro ADU. I wish all of Provo could have ADU, just like Pleasant Grove and, almost every other city in this valley, except for Orem, I think. And I'm a realtor, like Scott, but the reason why I become pro ADU is I like that the city knows which ones are being rented. I like that they come in and make sure there's off-street parking and an outside entrance. And I think actually it's really good because they also check and make sure like the living standards are good, because there's a lot of really dumpy apartments, in Provo. And so I think it's better to just accept it and have rules around it so that, it just keeps our city nice, keeps cars off the street. But I also agree with Scott, with how expensive houses are right now, so many buyers have to look at that income to afford the mortgage. I mean, I was looking today and for a 525 house, the mortgage is $3,200 for a first-time buyer. I mean, and we don't even have houses hardly at 525 in East Provo anymore. Like it feels like a house that's 800,000 is a bargain. So, I mean, their mortgage is probably like 5,000 plus a month. And so it really helps when the mortgage company will factor in that income, and it helps people move into.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. We are going to take this call on Zoom. You can please speak and please give us your name and your city of residence.
This is Jordan and Zach Wright of Columbus, Ohio, but we're moving back to Provo next month.
I just wanted to share our experience as college students living in a basement apartment in Oak Hills 8 years ago. It was overwhelmingly positive. We felt wanted and welcome. We also felt like our neighbors expected us to step up and contribute to the community. At the time, I barely knew how to cook, but was asked to bring dinner to a family of 8 with a new baby. My husband held 3 callings in our ward. We attended our first caucus meeting because our neighbors encouraged us to. I feel like we became responsible adults and good neighbors because the people in Oak Hills taught us how. A few months ago, one of those neighbors reached out to me and thanked me for being an influence in her child's life at a crucial period. So I understand why people think they don't want students in their neighborhoods, but let's remember that we were all students once, or we know students that we care about. I want the opportunity to live in one of these neighborhoods, a neighborhood that I love, and also provide a good apartment for young adults who, with some encouragement, can be an asset to the neighborhood. And I want to do it right with the goodwill of my neighbors and the assumption that I'll take responsibility for the action of my tenants. Furthermore, we plan on charging a reduced rent. It's not all about the money for us. The special permit process allows for this opportunity. It's a shame that so few people use legal avenues to rent their spaces, but the numbers that you shared show that we're not the only people trying to follow the law. And I wonder if a more effective use of the council's efforts would be to focus on the big fish, on policing and educating residents about ADU regulations, rather than by eliminating the small fish that has the potential for good. I hope that you'll open your minds to the possibility that ADUs in neighborhoods not currently zoned for them can, in the right circumstances, be a very good thing. Some of us aren't trying to use ADUs as an investment opportunity. We are trying to open our homes to friends and loved ones and help our neighborhoods have a richer blend of ages and experiences. Thank you.
Thank you. That was perfect timing. All right, come on up.
Good evening, Council. My name is Matthew Cluett, and I'm the Government Affairs Director for the Utah Central Association of Realtors. Thank you for your time. Our association believes that this proposed ordinance to remove the special use permit with administrative approval for ADUs is bad public policy and will turn a transparent and straightforward process opaque and difficult, and will shutter one of the tools for ownership housing that the city has in its toolbox. In order to afford the median price single family home within Provo, a family would have to earn $163,000 a year. ADUs can provide a pathway to make up for that extreme unaffordability. As currently constituted, the special use permit process for allowing an ADU serves as a transparent and straightforward path by which residents can obtain an ADU with neighborhood buy-in. By outlining requirements upfront and providing an administrative path, residents know exactly what they need to expect and what they need to do to receive approval in a clear, transparent, and fair way. By removing this administrative path and interjecting additional red tape, the process becomes less transparent and ripe for discrimination based on numerous complicating factors. Additionally, this change only hurts those seeking to obey the law, rather than the rule breakers that everyone agrees should be held accountable. In fact, making this process for obtaining an ADU more difficult will only exacerbate the proliferation of illegal ADUs. The National League of Cities, American Planning Association, Mortgage Bankers Association, the National Association of Home Builders, and the National Association of Realtors all concur that the elimination of legislative review in favor of administrative review is the better form of public policy in improving ADUs, as demonstrated in our Housing Supply Accelerator playbook. Additionally, actions taken by municipal bodies to make it more difficult to provide for housing units and attainable options during Utah's housing crisis provide the state legislature ammunition to push for measures that limit local land use control. I ask this body on the behalf of our 3,000 member association to either maintain the current fair and transparent administrative approval process as currently constituted or allow more time to deliberate on this fair.
Ooh, you were so close. All right. All right, council discussion. George Handley.
Thank you. I'm doing something I've never done before, and I've written out my comments.
This is getting serious.
Because I'm a little worried about not saying it the right way, and I want to make sure I say it. But I assure you, Catrice, that I'm under legal limit in the handbook, so don't worry.
We have a legal limit?
Yes, we do.
What is it?
I think it's 20 minutes. It's actually quite long. It's, yeah.
Oh my goodness. I could
it's
go
not-
home and back.
I'm not going to be that long, I promise. So obviously we have very strong disagreement on this issue on this council, and this is not at all fun. I like my council members. And I really know, and I know that I've said a lot on this subject. So part of me doesn't want to say anything. But I do feel the need to clarify my position one last time in case it persuades even one of my fellow counselors, or at least helps the public to understand my position better. Everywhere we build new homes in undeveloped parts of town, as we just approved earlier tonight, we must also pay for new roads and new infrastructure. And because they are larger and more spread out and have a higher per capita impact on city resources, single-family detached homes incur the greatest costs to every city. Extensive studies have shown that in the long term, building new single-family detached homes on undeveloped land will cost us more than we will bring in revenue from property tax. That's right. Cities do not pay for themselves as they grow, at least not when they overly favor single-family detached growth. This is the hard lesson cities are now starting to have to learn as they pay for more road and sewer repairs as they age and as populations continue to grow. No one has calculated those costs when they first built. So I want to make it clear, however, that I'm not against such neighborhoods. I live in one myself, although mine allows ADUs. And fortunately, I just turned 60. In fact, such neighborhoods are an exceptional opportunity for those fortunate enough to live there. This council made home ownership a priority, and that is because I think we all recognize that the middle class and upper middle class single-family detached neighborhood is one of the most fortunate circumstances American citizens can obtain. But the reality is that it is a dream that is becoming increasingly hard for Americans and Provoans to achieve. For perspective, the starting point for the upper middle class in America today is a salary of $120,000 a year. Only 20% of America earns more than that. That salary will not buy the average home in Provo. It will only reach about $400,000. So why are these neighborhoods so desirable? They bring many benefits. And what are some of those benefits? Safety, community, opportunity, health, social reinforcement, and upward mobility. And that's because in many ways it takes a village to raise a child, and the kind of village one finds in such neighborhoods can provide everything from financial advice, educational aspiration, and college preparation, multiple adult mentors beyond parents, friendships that reinforce and lift one's ambitions, job opportunities, letters of recommendation, music lessons, and all the other amenities that make it more likely for an American young person to succeed. Absent those amenities, it is much more difficult. People in America have an increasingly harder time getting into such neighborhoods, but once in, they are increasingly unlikely to fall out. Some have called it the glass floor of American life because once people get a hold of those opportunities, policies exist to protect and hoard those opportunities rather than to share them. To an increasing degree, the possibility of realizing the American dream boils down to the zip code one is fortunate or unfortunate enough to have been born into. As a city, we are generally willing to pay the price of development of such neighborhoods because we believe in the improvement in human lives that they can provide. But because they are so expensive and because they can otherwise shut out so many, smart city planning means that we need to find ways to mitigate those costs and negative impacts and maximize their benefits for more people. One negative impact is that because they spread citizens out so far from one another, they make our roads more congested and our air quality worse. Two of the most serious concerns our citizens have raised in our surveys. This is why infill projects and ADUs are such vital tools. They allow us to take advantage of underutilized housing stock and land by bringing modest numbers of residents into closer contact with the benefits of such neighborhoods at no extra cost to the city and to its infrastructure. And the vast majority of those in the field of urban planning and smart growth today know that ADUs help a city grow sustainably while assisting with home ownership. Wanting to keep out college kids and young marrieds who, by the way, in this community are the best behaved and most remarkable bunch anywhere on the planet, because it would change the character of a neighborhood that doesn't sit well with me. I believe this contradicts the character of this community. We are giving, generous, and we believe in sharing benefits for the less advantaged. Our family neighborhoods are overflowing with benefits and opportunities, while other parts of the city fall further behind. Why not give a few people a chance to learn and develop for a brief time in these neighborhoods? What is the threat exactly? It isn't more cars parked on the street because the city would reject an application that didn't have sufficient off-street parking. It isn't more cars driving on the street because if a house is filled instead with 2 adults and 4 children, as mine was at one point, rather than the 2 of us now, there would very likely be more traffic generated per day with my family. Occupancy, in other words, isn't a reliable measure of traffic. Car trips per day and distance per trip are the key measures. It isn't a threat to our safety either, and it isn't that it harms our chances for home ownership. Where we have seen these problems, and the woman who spoke earlier alluded to this, is where we have violators, not legal ADUs. And I think we're all in unanimous agreement on this, council. Otherwise, we wouldn't have passed the previous 4 items on our agenda, that we need to strengthen the city's ability to enforce on homeownership and against over-occupancy. I suggest that we continue that. The fact that we have violations in the city is an indication of a demand that outpaces a supply, so it seems wise to provide legal pathways that might ease that pressure. I will repeat what I have said before. There is no evidence in any reports from actual data in our city that this pathway makes such violations more likely. Allowing ADUs in the few overlay zones in Provo and the few people who have applied thus far for special permits have certainly not made violations more likely. On the contrary, the burden of proof is on those of you who want to repeal to demonstrate that providing fewer pathways to do this legally will result in fewer violations. We all know that violators exist in many of our neighborhoods where they are not allowed, so clearly making ADUs illegal has not been working. One reason I have heard people give for why they aren't turning in those folks in droves is because they know that with owner occupancy, it isn't a big nuisance, and that they end up liking the people who live there. I asked already that my fellow councilors would consider leaving this pathway as a compromise. That is what it was originally, a compromise. I feared a citywide option for which we had 4 votes on the last council would get overturned by a future council and that this would turn into a political football. I was thanked for being respectful of the future council we have here. I thought a modest pathway would sit well enough and would do no harm. And I have seen no harm. I had hoped for reciprocal consideration of the compromise, and I still do. This is feeling, however, to me like the political football I wanted to avoid. So I want to ask one more time for this consideration. Repealing this goes against a rather unprecedented unanimous judgment of our Planning Commission, against our general plan, without strong staff support for such an action, against expert advice, and does so with the slimmest of margins on a divided council, and it is based, I repeat, on no evidence of harm. And this is after we have just passed new legislation to empower our enforcement against violators. Moreover, as Travis brought up in an email earlier today, if we worry about the state imposing its will on us into the future, I don't know how charitably our state level partners will look on this when they see this repeal. This is a very bad precedent, and I would plead with my council to please reconsider. Thanks.
Thanks, George. Any other discussion? Councillor Hoban.
Thanks. First of all, a single mom inquired with this development services about an ADU, and she was told that that they wouldn't be processed, that she could go through the process, but that wouldn't be processed until after the council had made a decision. And so she didn't submit because she didn't want to waste city staff's time. And it's a very cumbersome process. Once it was laid out for her, she was like, okay, yeah, not gonna worry about it until after the council decides. But had she known that they would have been processed, she would have submitted. So I think there needs to be some consideration for people like that. I'll get you her info, and I'd like her to be considered with that group that is processed. So I have been very supportive of the direction we've been going as a council with ADUs, in that a slow, very tactful rollout of ADUs so that we could get enforcement in place and make sure we had it right. And so part of my support of that slow rollout was that we had a pathway for people in the meantime who are in dire circumstances, such as a single mom or someone who loses their job, to be able to keep their home. I don't feel good about the direction we're heading as a council now with ADUs. And as all of you know, I've been so supportive of how we've been trying to be very careful about rolling out ADUs. This just doesn't feel right. It feels like we're on the wrong side of this issue here with peeling back something that ultimately about 30 in the last 2 to 3 years have been processed. It just seems strange that we're so adamant about removing that pathway. And I don't think that a rezone is a practical pathway for most people. There's a significant cost, $1,000, which most people, that's going to be so prohibitive for a single family homeowner to try to go through a rezone process, and the amount of time that takes to remove this, to take this out of the hands of staff, just seems so prohibitive. Just humor me a little bit. There's some history because we have some new council members. A few years ago, by the skin of our teeth, we kept the ability to have some autonomy over ADUs here in Provo. There were 3 cities, I believe, college towns, that were given an exemption to the 75% rule. We barely kept that through lots of work by the Utah Leagues of Cities and Towns. But it was with the understanding that cities, that us 3 to 4 cities were still going to move forward with ADUs and try to create pathways and make ways to make ADUs happen or homeownership happen. And I think this is going to be a real bad message that we send. Essentially, the message that state legislators are going to hear is that Provo City is going backwards on ADUs. We're removing something so inconsequential to our city. It's impacted a few dozen homes at most, yet it's so important to those homeowners who need it in order to qualify or keep their home. It's like we're going to die on this sword for something so inconsequential to us as a city. It's doing no harm currently. I think the only arguments I've heard against it that kind of hold any water are, well, we don't want to do spot zoning. This is an alternative to spot zoning. A spot zone remains with the property. At least in this case, it doesn't carry on. And so we're going back to spot zoning is what we're going to end up doing for people who have the means, $1,000 to pay to do that and the time to go through the process, which to me is, again, I think it's going to be too prohibitive for most people. We're taking any feedback from the neighbors out. The neighbors, at least in this case, have a say, and they kind of have a vote in the matter. We're removing that. And most importantly, I think we are giving ammunition to stakeholders, such as the Realtors Association, developers and such, to point to Provo and say, see, we told you. You shouldn't have let them have that exemption. I venture to say, and I put $100 on it, that come this upcoming legislative session, our exemption will be removed. because we want to remove this pathway. I don't understand it. It seems very short-sighted, not to mention just not very kind to the people who at least have a pathway at this point. So I guess my closing argument is that I think we should keep the pathway, continue to have a slow and cautious rollout of ADUs throughout the city in a way that, you know, we can enforce and such. And I love the point that was made by one of the callers, I believe, who said, rather than removing something like a pathway, let's focus on the enforcement. And I think that's been Craig's big talking point the whole time. So if we truly are supportive of home ownership and trying to enable good people to have an ADU and be able to, you know, possibly qualify or keep their home, I think we should, again, focus on enforcement and keep the pathway in place. If not, I got the $100 on the line. We'll see what happens in January, February, March, but I'm pretty sure we're going to lose that exception. So I guess we'll make our bed, we'll sleep in it. Thank you.
Counselor Whipple.
So I'm a little bit more critical of this process than Councilors Hoban and Handley are right now. When we implemented this, we knew it was not a perfect process, and there were some definite limitations to it. And we did it asking for feedback for how it was going, how it was being implemented. This process, some of the feedback we got was that some neighborhoods have used this to support their neighbors. Some people have been able to take advantage of this, and it's been wonderful for them. Other feedback that we've gotten is that some neighborhoods have used this to create a hostile environment, that they have sent around letters saying, don't you dare even ask for this. We do not welcome this here. And that's a bad thing. We do not want that in our city. So that's one bad thing that we've heard from this. Another bit of feedback that we got from our development services was that 66% is too high of a number. This process would be better if we reduce the approval to 50%. And we have, instead of taking that recommendation from the people who are actually processing these and seeing who is asking for this, and completely ignored it and saying we're going to throw this whole thing out. The next thing that we got on our feedback is that we have not had a flood of applications, that this has been a very manageable thing for our city to do, and that everyone who has applied and gone through this process has invited city scrutiny of them and their property. And so the ones who have been approved are in compliance. They have supported their neighbors. These are not scofflaws. These are not people who are doing violations and causing problems by doing an illegal activity. And the ones who were denied, we kind of got them on our radar so that we can follow up with zoning and check to see if, having gotten denied, they went ahead and tried to do it anyway, right? They have put themselves on the radar. So for an enforcement point of view, this has only been a good and useful thing. I agree that to revoke this special use permit process would be to take a step backward. Although I would be in favor of revoking it if we were concurrently with that expanding the right to have ADUs throughout the city or through more residential areas where we're seeing that it's appropriate or where we know we have illegal ADUs, because I think we get significant benefit by bringing those properties into compliance, going over. And so when we have our zoning officers talk to them and ask them about their over occupancy, we can say, look, you can be in compliance with here. They don't have to lie to us. We can give them the form and say, look, here's your rental dwelling license. Here's your application. We can serve both the homeowners and the innocent tenants who are in these and create safer conditions by making it so that they can do this legally. And the concern that this allowing ADUs more widely would create additional over-occupation. And the reason we believe that is because we know of these illegal ones. I don't think, based on the numbers that we've seen this year, that we get a lot of new ADUs for this. I think what we do is the ones that our neighbors know about that are illegal can become compliant. We're not increasing, in other words, the number of houses that are being used with ADUs. We're just curing this violation so that we can have proper oversight and control, and so that it's easier for our zoning enforcement to deal with these properties. So I think that the special use permit is not a perfect process. I think that based on what we've seen in this year or so, there could be good revisions to it. If we are not willing to do those revisions, I can't, well, I would support making those changes based on the input that we got. I do not support revoking it without some better option that we give. So I recognize the problems with this process, but I would rather keep it as an option than to completely remove this from the table without anything else to replace it.
Chair McKay?
Yes.
While everyone else is debating whether they want to make a comment or not, could I clarify one thing? Bill and I have been exchanging some texts, and I looked at the pending ordinance amendments section of the code. I do not believe that it's possible to process the applications that are in the queue because it would violate that pending ordinance amendment with one caveat. So the pending ordinance amendment section of the code says that pending ordinances shall apply to the application. So it is mandatory that they apply to any applications submitted after the noticing of the item in the planning commission. Okay. The exception, there's I guess two exceptions to that. One is that if the ordinance is defeated, if it doesn't pass, then obviously it just goes away and all applications that were in go through. I don't have any idea if this next comment is going to be welcome or just going to cause more controversy, but the other option is that you could specifically in the ordinance specify that you don't want the pending ordinance amendment section of the code to apply. So you could in the effective date section of the ordinance, if it passes, you could modify it so that it establishes an effective date and specifically says that the ordinance does not apply to any applications submitted before that effective date. So I just throw that out there to clarify what that discussion was and for you to consider that as you go forward.
Thank you, Brian. All right, any more council discussion? Is there anybody who wants to go before Travis goes in? Okay, go ahead, Travis. Wait, Councilor Christensen.
So my concern with ADUs is actually enforcement. And I've been encouraged by the work that Bill and Scott are starting. I think we're actually going to get the kind of technology and tools to make it much easier and to create the kind of workflow that actually addresses the big issues. My issue with this pathway is it's so insignificant. That was my issue. To your point, I just didn't think it was very good legislation. I don't hate ADUs. I just don't think this is the way to do it. I think it's a much better way when a neighborhood gets together and says, here's what we want. The Northeast neighborhood plan, the whole plan said, let's go ADUs across the entire neighborhood plan. Okay, so we're not talking about cutting back. We're talking about just making sure that it's not it is kind of spot zoning. And from what I hear, actually creates as much grief as it provides hope. So I don't have this big thing against let's kill ADUs. I just think this piece of legislation is weak. Now, you might say better weak than nothing. That's fair. But it's also, it's not like, we've got 50% of the city that's already in zone. I see that continuing. It is part of the plan. I would like to see it be an orderly way of going about it so that neighborhoods and streets and groups of streets decide that rather than going door to door and, and all that kind of stuff. It just seems like a nightmare to me. So I don't have an issue with students living in, in ADUs. I don't have an issue. I mean, all of a sudden I feel like I'm this bad guy, but not like none of that is on my mind at all. I'm actually just thinking we've got some legislation. I don't think that's very strong. I hear friends in neighborhoods that hate it, feel like it's hostile. Spot zoning is weak. It's actually our job. And in listening to neighborhoods, in fact, we just permitted a neighborhood, when was it, in June? See, I think that's the right way to go about it. And if we add to that the enforcement and giving our team the tools to actually start, I think we can make some big progress. So I just didn't think the pathway was the right solution. So here's my suggestion. I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze at this point. My desire is not let's split the council on such a, I'm not talking about the people who are applying in this pathway, but I'm just talking about the overall in terms of the scope of things. My goodness, we've got much bigger fish to fry. And I would just as soon not divide the council and get us off track, which in my mind really is enforcement, no pressure. It really is enforcement, giving them the tools. So in listening to this tonight, I would actually make a motion that we continue this discussion. Rather than like, let's fight this to the death. Honestly, I just don't think, I think my intents are being misunderstood and misrepresented. I'm sure I don't understand. I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze. I would rather take this offline and perhaps come back to it. But I'm not inclined to think that it's a good idea to polarize the council with something that has such little impact. I'm not saying it's not an issue, because I think they're still, doesn't make the legislation any better. But I would make a motion that we continue this.
Bill?
I would love Brian's input on this, but if you continue this remains pending legislation. The legislation was introduced to the Planning Commission on the 10th of October. That would keep this as pending legislation until the 10th of April. I think that puts people like Mr. Murray in a very awkward position and puts my department in an awkward position. So please deal with that some way or another, if you would.
And I would weigh in on that. I think that's a great point, Bill. What I would probably suggest is under a Robert's Rules of Order kind of thing, if instead of stating it as a motion to continue, if you make a motion to postpone indefinitely, that actually under Robert's Rule scenario just takes it off of the table and means that it's tabled until somebody brings it up again. I'm not sure if that's the intent, but you could make that motion. I think that would, in my view, that would kill the pending legislation argument and would then mean that it was still an item that you had a planning commission recommendation on, so you wouldn't need to go back to planning commission unless you're altering it so much that you don't, that their recommendation isn't really on the new proposal. And it could just be brought back to the council by having two council members or the council chair reschedule it. But again, I'm not sure that if that's the intent, but that's a possibility.
I'm not sure that's my intent either. I think what I'm asking for is 2 more weeks. We've talked about this. I would like to be open to what my fellow councilors are saying. I'm not suggesting I agree. I still, for all the reasons I just said, I don't think this is a good idea. I also want to make sure that we don't die on the wrong hill. I'd much rather we really get energized about enforcement. And so from that standpoint, my motion would be that we continue it for 2 weeks and that we give some more time offline to really assess where we are with that. That's my motion. You can disagree, but that would be my motion, to continue it for 2 weeks.
I'll second it. I prefer to second Brian's motion, but I'll second Craig's.
Yes, Malia?
Well, I'll just wait to see what the motion, what that.
I do definitely want to make one comment. I think it's extremely mischaracterizing to make to say some intent that anyone on the council hates students. None of this has anything to do with hating students. You said it does have to do with not wanting students in their neighborhood and that they're excellent people, and that the implication was that people don't like students. And I just want to make sure that I've never heard that from anyone on the council. And I know that's not my stance on the council. And this has nothing to do with trying to keep students out of anything, or students have nothing to do with my feeling on different parts of this issue. Rachel?
I have a quick question for Brian. Would it be possible for us to make some sort of a motion that would suspend the pending ordinance amendment so the applications that are on hold right now could go forward during this continuation period?
Yeah, I was trying to think that through. I don't know how Bill feels about it. If it's literally only continued for 2 weeks, I'm not sure that that is necessary, and it might not be worth the brain damage of trying to figure out how to do it. Although I would say to Councillor Hoban that he might want to encourage that person to apply within the next 2 weeks. But I don't think that you can by motion suspend the law, because the law is that it applies. What I think the best idea that I came up with in my 30 seconds of brainstorming was that if you made a motion to bring it back in 2 weeks, this could be a modification, and again, I don't know where everybody's at on what you want with this, but if you made a motion to bring it back in 2 weeks, but to bring it back with an effective date that specifically says that it does not apply to anything prior to that effective date, then I think we could make the argument that, okay, you have signaled as a body that the actual ordinance that you will be considering will not be effective until that effective date, and therefore the pending legislation ordinance doesn't apply. Did you follow the logic of that?
I did. And the follow-up question I have is, would we have wanted people to simply start this process, or to have everything in so that they would be vested by the time that we consider this?
So the pending ordinance amendment ordinance statute requires a complete application in order to be vested. So they would need to have a complete application in before the ordinance becomes effective in order to process.
Then my question, which may be for Bill, is when people started their application and were told that it was put on hold, did they then stop doing all of the steps that they needed in order to have a complete application?
No, that's not what happened.
Okay.
We haven't done a review beyond the very initial stuff. So it ball's been in our court, not theirs.
Okay.
They submitted their application.
They submitted their application with all their signatures. So it wasn't that they came and asked a question and you said,
Right.
nope, those are on hold. They came and said, here's my packet. And you're like, I will take it, but not do anything.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
So I guess just as a follow-up, again, because of the complication of what I just explained, my personal preference would be to probably not worry about that today, and to say in 2 weeks from now, it's either going to fail, in which case it's irrelevant, or 2 weeks from now, then in the ordinance, you specify that it's not going to apply. And those applications can then be processed then, and they've just had to wait 2 more weeks.
Okay.
So with the strong feelings that are all over the place, I would just suggest let's push 2 weeks and let's get greater clarity and understanding. And I realize people are going to have to wait 2 more weeks. I get that. And I'd like to think that we could make better decisions and with a little more time. And I realize we've had a lot of times it's been going on. I'd ask from everyone 2 more weeks.
Do we meet in 2 more weeks?
We do, we meet on December 3rd, so I guess that's 3 weeks because Thanksgiving adds a week there.
I was wondering about that.
2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Just kidding, I don't know the calendar, it's in 2 weeks, yeah.
Counselor Handley.
I just want to get clarification. Well, I want to clarify. I did not imply or say that anyone hated students. The policy position that has been adopted and that I've heard from fellow council members is that it changes the character of a neighborhood to allow renters in to the ADUs. So that's all I was referring to. I can show you my words, Catrice.
Oh, I
was
heard
very
'em.
careful about how I chose them because I would never imply that you hated
Well,
students or anybody. on this
that's the
council.
feeling I got from it, but fair
Okay.
enough. I appreciate the.
I was very careful
consideration.
about that. But it is true that we were saying we don't want them in because it changes the character, and that's all I was alluding to. I don't
That's not
understand.
in my reasoning at all.
I've heard you say that it changes the character of a neighborhood. I'm saying I don't understand that. That's what I was referring to.
Okay.
I also want to get clarity on what Craig was referring to because with regard to neighborhoods, what the status of that is, because I thought that got changed. And I'm glad to hear you like that, Craig, but I thought you didn't like the Foothills proposal. You had initially
That's-
opposed it, as I recall.
Look, I'm in favor of what neighborhoods want. And if the neighborhood wants that, I'm supporting that. So I'm not taking a personal stand. I'm trying to represent the people that voted me in. So when they took a look at all the process, went through with Bill and the team, that's what they came up with. I support them in that.
But is the status of that neighborhood proposal that if we revoked this, we'd go back to text amendment requests?
Yeah, so text amendment requests are part of the code and will continue to be part of the code in this section. That's the second pathway. Remember the PowerPoint from the work meeting? So anybody can apply for an ordinance text amendment for as many properties or as one property to be allowed ADU, either as a rezone or to be allowed as the map that allows ADUs. So you could do that before we created the Pathways program, and you can do that now. The Pathways program, the multiple properties pathway, which is what we're referring to as the neighborhood thing. There isn't specifically a call out to a neighborhood. But in that process, then multiple property owners can go through and say, this is our group of, contiguous properties, and we're all applying. And then they get 66% of those properties around them, but they still have to go through the process that was there before the pathways, which is to then apply for an ordinance text amendment and to go to planning commission to get a recommendation and then come to the council and then has a vote on it. So the only addition in that pathways is the signature, but everything else is the same as before when we created the pathways.
Okay, that's helpful. So if we were to repeal it, the signature requirement would go away.
Well,
And that's what.
The signature requirement for an individual property,
Not for the.
there is no signature requirement for multiple properties. So they can if they want to, because it adds evidence to their case when they come to planning commission and the council to say,
If we
Well,
repealed this, you're
no,
saying.
let me
No.
clarify that because there is
No.
still a signature
Yeah.
requirement. It just does something different. So let me clarify.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about two different things here. We're talking about special use permits, right? So this proposal gets rid of special use permits. So the ability of somebody to come in and apply for a permit that is administratively approved instead of by the council based on the collection of signatures would be done away with, okay? You always have been able to and still can apply for a text amendment to the code or a zone map amendment. Anybody can do that, one property or multiple properties, but there's a fee for doing that, and it's a fairly high fee. What this provision leaves in is a special way to do a text amendment where you can come in only for ADUs. You can come in one property or multiple properties, and you can apply for a text amendment or map amendment to allow you to have ADUs. And if you gather signatures, you don't have to pay the fee. Okay? But gathering the signatures does not guarantee the approval of your application. It's specifically stated in this amendment that gathering of the signatures is a show to the council of the neighborhood support for the single or multiple property rezone or text or map amendment. Okay, but and there's a couple of other things that this actually. A couple of other things that you would normally have to do if you were doing a text amendment or a map amendment that you don't have to do. So it's a faster way. Well, depending on how, maybe not faster, but anyway, it's a different way to do a text or map amendment specifically for ADUs. And there is still a signature requirement in order to take advantage of the special way. Or you can just pay the fee and do the normal way.
With that said, Brian, to this gentleman's point over here, if we do the text amendment way, then his children will be able to have an ADU and it's in perpetuity.
Right. If you either rezone the property so that it isn't now in a zone that allows ADUs, or if you do a map amendment where you change that map and add one or multiple properties to it, it's then a permitted use on that property, not a special use permit. It's going to continue until rezoned or abandoned.
And the way
Rezoned and
that we are discussing now gets rid of just once the property owner sells, the special use permit goes away.
That particular method is completely done away with by this amendment.
Yeah.
I guess I'm not.
Counselor
entirely- oh, sorry.
Gary Garrett.
I'm not clear on what we can accomplish in such a short period of time of 2 weeks, but I'm prepared to put my best efforts and mind to creative solutions as well for this. Similarly, I don't oppose ADUs. I have supported, though, letting neighborhoods decide if they want that for their community, for their neighborhood. So if there are some tweaks, some fine tuning that we can do to create that compromise, I'm willing to support that.
Counselor Handley.
Yeah, I appreciate both those comments and the willingness to take 2 more weeks. And I appreciate that there's sensitivity, to feelings on the council. I'm not going to be unable to continue to cooperate and work well with the fellow council members on this council over this issue. I feel very strongly about it, but I've been in the minority the whole way through. So nothing's going to change in 2 weeks. I mean, I don't know what exactly you're proposing, but if there's actual proposal on the table for some alternative, like Rachel was referring to, I'm all ears, but that also doesn't seem like that's going to take place in 2 weeks. I think if you feel like, I don't know, my pitch would be, if it's not that big of a deal, then I would vote to not repeal it. And if you feel strongly in 6 months' time that it's time to repeal it, or there's more data to suggest that it needs to be repealed, my pitch was, I just don't see any evidence that it's done any harm. And because it is low hanging fruit, or it's a small thing. I share your feeling. I don't know why we've been spending so much time over this, but it's the only thing we have at this point. Nobody's offered alternatives. And there are a lot of people who are hanging in the balance here that are suffering. And there are only going to be more people like that every single year. It's not going to be a lot though. It's going to be 10 to 20 people a year who are going to say, we really need this for our family. And I think it just makes sense. But if that's not how you feel, then I think, we lose the vote and we move forward. I just don't think waiting 2 weeks does us any good.
Well, then you would vote no.
All right. Any more discussion on the motion? We'll take a vote on the motion.
Wait. Go ahead.
Counselor
Well, it
Hoban.
seems like there's some angst around the 2 weeks. So a substitute motion that we wait a month. I mean, again, I prefer that we postpone indefinitely, but if there's not an appetite for that, then a month gives us a little more time to come up with. Yeah.
My question just for staff so that we can be helpful. We've talked about coming up with more information or different ideas or a different proposal. Is there anything? My current plan, if this motion does pass, is to get together with groups of 3 counselors at a time and kind of talk about maybe what information that they're looking for, or a different amendment or something else that we could look at, to just help make this decision either easier on this or to propose something new, like Counselor Whipple was suggesting, in place of this. But I was just wondering if there's anything people had ideas about that now that might change either from 2 weeks or a month, or anyway. I just want to let you know what council staff's plan will be if this motion passes.
Counselor Bogdan.
Okay, Malia, I've been thinking about this a lot. Next time is when I think the Northeast plan comes to us.
Yes.
Okay, so if we pass that plan, and in that plan, it has that from Will's Pit Stop, whatever that road is, all the way up to the canyon, they want ADUs. So does that automatically make that section?
No.
They have to come in on their own and put that
Those all
forward?
have to be done through land use decisions, which are held by you, by the
Okay.
council.
All right, thank you.
They would apply like neighborhoods.
It's just like the general plan where we say, well, this is probably going to be rezoned to do this. This is going to be, we're designating this area to be commercial or mixed use. Those still have to come through planning applications or through neighborhoods doing things like this and then approved by you. But it's a guiding document to try and help councils and neighborhoods kind of plan out those areas of the city. But ultimately, they are land use decisions that either get spurred by the council changing those in code and zoning or through planning applications.
So, Bill, you were on that. Is that their desire that they go parcel by parcel or street by street, or just bring in the whole Northeast area? Because that would change our percentage dramatically. Instead of 50%, we'd be
So the
higher.
plan says that's how they intend to provide extra housing is through ADUs. Just like Malia said, you'd have to go through the zone change or map amendment process, the code amendment or map amendment process to come to you, and they'd have to come in as neighborhoods and do that.
That's a neighborhoods, not parcel by parcel.
Well, the ordinance would allow them to come in parcel by parcel, but I just don't know how much of that you would say.
To just kind of give you the range of it, Becky. So the council could, so that map that's in 1430, the council just adopted that map. It was a carryover from a different overlay and said, okay, all of the parcels within these zones that we've identified on this map can have ADUs. At any point, the council could expand that map or say, these zones here now allow ADUs. You have the purview to do that. Or you can wait for the individual applicants that come forward. So there's a range that you're able to do there. So,
But adopting this general plan doesn't amend that map that she's
Agree.
referring to. That's a different step you'd have to take.
yes, the general plan is just a guiding document that we help guide the council and the neighborhoods and the planning staff to say this is agreed upon principles for this area. So we want to look for things that fit this.
Now, another point too, when you're talking about percentages, like for example, the percentage you gave us of areas that have ADUs don't include the area that we just approved tonight, right? They don't, because that will be able to have ADUs.
If it's being changed from a non-residential zone to a residential zone,
Right.
then yes, that
So
will now
all
be
that-
added into the denominator
All
of
that
that
farmland, all that farmland on the west that will most likely be residential is not being considered in our percentage right now, where it will most likely end up being a percentage that can have ADUs.
Yes, and
And that's a
Michael,
significant amount.
Michael worked with Grace and GIS to actually run those percentages, so he's going to come tell you what that
Great.
would actually be.
That development you just approved was 54 acres. So it's a
Yeah,
big piece.
there's hundreds of acres.
Yeah, so we did run those numbers about a month or two ago, and just off the top of my head, if every single thing that's farmland currently on the west side gets changed to residential, it will get and nothing else changes in East Provo, then it gets us up into the 50% range, like mid 50s.
Thank you, Michael. Counselor Whipple.
I just had a question on the Northeast plan that's coming to us. My understanding is that the Technical Advisory Committee is a relatively small committee. And so even though they would be recommending ADUs for that entire area, I don't know that that necessarily means that there's support for all of the residents in it, such that they would be able to go through the signature process or demonstrate, that granular support of all of the residents for this change, even though it's recommended in this planning document. All right. Now we still have a motion we need to vote on. That's Craig's motion. Because Travis's didn't have a second, right?
I don't think we asked for a second.
Okay.
Is there a
Do we have a
second?
second for Travis's motion? All right, we're going to take a vote on Craig's second motion. Counselor Bogdan,
No.
Counselor Christensen.
Yes.
Counselor Garrett,
Yes.
Counselor Handley.
Sorry, this is for the 2 weeks.
Yes.
No.
Counselor Hoban,
Yes.
Counselor McKay, yes. Counselor Whipple.
Yes.
And that vote is
5-2.
5-2, so it passes.
Does the council have any further direction to give to council staff? Otherwise, I'll go forward with setting up meetings with 3 at a time to try and come up with different ideas.
So I think counselors can take care of it on their own, and if they
I'd
need,
just wait.
and if they need information from you, they can let you know individually, but
Okay.
we can be discussing things amongst ourselves.
Do you want us to come up with any different iterations of this or different?
I think if people want that, they will email you or text
Okay.
you.
And
I will be in a holding pattern.
And so on my behalf, I will throw out this idea that I have no idea where this is going, but if there is some movement that we're not going to get rid of the special use permit, I still think that some of the changes that we have proposed here about the process that was going to stay anyway are good. So we can hold off on that and do that later, but there are changes that I would recommend making here regardless of whether you want the special use permit to stay or not. So I'll
Wait,
just throw
what
that out.
changes?
Well, so for example, this section about this subsection C, for example, is brand new and clarifies, because of the issue that we had last time, it clarifies for people that signatures do not guarantee approval. I think that should go in no matter what else happens.
Gotcha.
So
So could we get a version of this to look at that would keep the special use permit, but have the clarification changes from legal?
yes, we can definitely do that. Basically, I was asking if anybody wanted that. So if you want that, I can definitely do that.
I think that would be helpful. Thank you. Kevin? Well, you don't need anything from us to publish this.
Unless there's any other,
I mean, you'll be
amendments or
publishing the same
changes.
thing, right? So then if if people give you other things they want, then we'll need to talk about that.
Yep.
Okay. All right. If there is no objection, we will now adjourn the Provo Municipal Council by unanimous consent.
Recording stopped.